Chapter 61 Mandu was getting married. A week later, at midnight, the moon and stars were sparse. Yi Ning drove to the riverside. At this time of the day, other than the roadside barbecue store, only the 24-hour convenience store was still open. "Old four, have a seat." Seeing Yi Ning come over, at the small dining table, a burly man warmly greeted him. The table was already full of freshly grilled kebabs, and it looked like he had been waiting for quite a while. Yi Ning sniffed, a hint of a smile on his face as he greeted, "Boss, it's really been a long time." The burly man was Yi Ning's college roommate, named Meng Du. Meng Du was not a Jiangcheng local, but a serious northeastern man. In addition to the oldest Meng Du and the oldest Yi Ning, there is the second Li Bin and the oldest Qian Wentao. Li Bin and Qian Wentao, after graduation, both participated in graduate school exams, and both disembarked and left Jiangcheng. Gradually, the contact between several people is also much less. Only Meng Du and Yi Ning, two people, from time to time will still get together. "Boss, the first few times I asked you out, I said I was busy. Meng Du was working as a planner in an advertisement company and was also a part-time trainer in a gym. So he doesn't have much time off on weekdays and works almost every day. Of course, he earns a lot of money. Every month the income is over 15,000. This kind of income is considered good no matter where you are. I'm calling you today. Firstly, we brothers haven't gotten together for a long time, so let's have a meal together, and secondly, I want to make an official announcement that I'm getting married." "Really? Congratulations." Yi Ning congratulated. Because of the drive, he who originally didn't want to drink still raised the wine glass in front of him to toast to Meng Du. He was really happy for Meng Du. When he was in college, Meng Du was originally a stuffy person who didn't talk much. The type that blushes for half a day when talking to girls. But when one day, Meng Du led Tang Yuran, the flower of the math department, to Yi Ning and the others, it simply left the three people in the dormitory dumbfounded. They scratched their heads, cannot figure out, this boring gourd is how to tease his girlfriend, not to mention or department flower. Then later, in the dormitory tripartite trial, they learned that actually is Tang Yuran initiative to pursue Meng Du. More so, a few people hate the teeth itchy. In fact, when the romance between the two was exposed, many people did not look favorably on it, thinking that the gap was too big. Although Meng Du's appearance is not bad, but is out of the countryside, the economic conditions are not good, when the university is often outside to do part-time work. Tang Yuran is a local of Jiangcheng. The family has a house in the center of Jiangcheng. Even if you can't count the rich and famous, at least it's a well-off life. And Tang Yuran pursuers, many of them are not lack of some rich son. Many people in the class thought that the two graduation season is the breakup season. But a few years later, the relationship is still the same, and the two will soon be married. Yi Ning is watching them all the way over, and now finally want to cultivate the fruit, is more heartfelt blessing two people. "What? After a few years, you've finally gotten your mother-in-law to settle down?" Yi Ning raised an eyebrow at Meng Du and grinned. Yi Ning had known before that if it wasn't for Tang Yuran's mom disagreeing with the duo's marriage, with their feelings, perhaps the two would have been together long ago. It couldn't be helped that Meng Du wasn't a native of Jiangcheng, and his family's conditions weren't good, so it was normal for the female parent to raise some requirements that weren't excessive. The good thing is that Meng Du is very diligent and progressive, alone in this Jiangcheng, but also to break into a world. Hearing Yi Ning's words, Meng Du's expression slightly stagnated, and his hand holding the wine glass paused. A trace of complexity passed across his face as he shook his head and said, "No, it was Ran Ran who secretly took the account book and ran out. She had a fight with her family and then ran out saying that she wanted to marry me, but I know that she wanted to get her parents' blessing." Speaking of this, Meng Du picked up his wine glass and tilted his head back to take a sip, placing the empty glass heavily on the table with a dang sound. Yi Ning nodded, staring at the dejected man in front of him without speaking. What he saw most in Meng Du was helplessness. This was a competitive and indomitable northeastern man. And yet, he would also be overwhelmed by the immense pressure. Of course, he is happy, at least there is a woman, can always accompany, willingly with him. The two of them chatted for a long time, and as the drunkenness of the wine hit them, they became casual in their speech. "Lao Si, I remember when the rumor was that the class, Zhang Shui, still liked you. How come you didn't have any ideas at that time?" Yi Ning shook his head with a bitter smile. Zhang Shui is quite good-looking, but the utilitarianism is not generally heavy. He also remembered that when he was about to graduate from his senior year, Zhang Shui came to him alone. Just asked him a question, "What does your family do?" At that time, Yi Ning was also puzzled, but still said that his parents were farmers. At once, Jiang Shue's face was disappointed to the extreme. Without even saying hello, she left. Later, when he heard others say that Jiang Shui had a crush on him, Yi Ning realized what she meant at that time. I wouldn't dare to have any ideas, her family situation and my family are not at all on the same scale, it's impossible to have a result. For this, Yi Ning was very vocal. What about now? I heard that Jiang Shui will soon return to China. Chapter 62 You even have Koenigsegg 1-1. I heard that she returned to China to invite us old classmates for dinner, and at that time, Mr. Wang will also go. How, you did not receive the notice? Yi Ning shook his head, he really did not know about this matter. During the university period, his relationship with Jiang Shui was quite okay. But to say how close, it couldn't be talked about a bit. So at that time, it was rumored that Jiang Shui liked him, and perhaps it was only a slight favoritism towards Yi Ning's face value. Back then, I was also the face of the school, right? Now that so many years have passed, it is possible that he has long since forgotten. At least if Meng Du did not mention Jiang Shui today, Yi Ning could not remember. Hey, I don't care about other things. Anyway, you have to come to my wedding. That's natural, drink. Yi Ning smiled and picked up his wine glass. Just like this, the two of them drank until 2 in the morning before finishing. Yi Ning called a chauffeur and pulled Mundu directly to his villa. And sent a message to Tang Yuan to explain. The next day, the sun rose. Yi Ning brewed tea and leisurely watched Pleasant Goat and Big Wolf in the first-floor living room. Hearing Mei Sheep say, "Don't want to be in the same pot as Boiling Goat," almost sprayed the tea out of his mouth. Suddenly heard the sound of the door opening and moving upstairs and looked up. Mundu rubbed his eyes with a face that looked like he was having a hard time waking up. Yo, wake up. Alas. From now on, I will never drink this late again. I ran to the restroom twice and I still don't feel well. Mundu covered his stomach in pain. However, your kid is really surprising, said that you made a fortune, did not expect to live on the big bio. Before that, I heard Liao Peng say that Yi Ning bought a house in the Emerald City. Now it seems that the Emerald City, that big flat, is not considered a mansion. Now this villa, at least 15 million proper. This decoration, this pattern, why the old man is not cultured, a sentence of lying down to go all over the world. Meng Du touched the carved railing on the corridor with a face of enjoyment. This kind of house was beyond the reach of even the boss of their company. I really don't know how Yi Ning earned it. Or was this kid originally a super rich second generation? He was hiding his identity during his college years, and the 3-year appointment to invite the young master to return? Shouldn't be that far-fetched, right? What's the matter? Are you excited? Buy a set of chanting. Yi Ning flirted. Meng Du rolled his eyes, walked down the stairs. You think everyone is as rich as you. My goal is to buy a set of 3 rooms and a hall in the future. It has been very good. Now he has a deposit of more than 100,000 yuan, and then work for a few years. It should be able to pay a down payment around Jiangcheng. He dares not think about the city center. Even if there is a down payment, the pressure of mortgage payments in the future is no joke. By the way, there are rice buns on the table. What are the arrangements for the afternoon? Yi Ning asked with his legs crossed. Meng Du came to sit beside Yi Ning with the rice, stuffed half a bun in his mouth and puffed his mouth. Later go back to change clothes, there are still classes this afternoon. Yi Ning nodded. Okay, then I will send you after dinner. You eat first, I have some things now, first go out. Yi Ning got up and went upstairs to his bedroom. In Mundu's puzzled eyes, he picked up a bag and left the villa. It was only half an hour later that Yi Ning returned home. Let's go, I'll send you back. Row. Collecting his things, he came to the parking lot. Shit. You're actually driving a Mercedes-Benz Big G, which is a man's dream car. Yesterday night, Mundo was so drunk that he didn't know what kind of car he was in. Now he saw that it was a Mercedes-Benz Big G. His eyes were glowing. This car he really like, not to mention the Big G, even if it is ordinary Mercedes-Benz he cannot afford. A few years of work, he bought a Chang'an Shine as a replacement, has been very remarkable. Don't keep staring at this one, there's another one next to it. There's another one? After Yi Ning's reminder, Meng Du saw that a black sports car was parked at the back of the Mercedes-Benz Big G. It was the Koenigsegg one. Old 4, you this also too exaggerated. Meng Du's lips trembled. He knew that Yi Ning was rich, tens of millions of dollars in villas and millions in cars. But these things seemed so insignificant in front of this Koenigsegg 11. This was a car that no truly rich person could buy. At this moment, Meng Du was really comprehending Yi Ning's anticlimax. This teammate, who had double rode with him in his dorm room back then, was ahead of everyone else. You couldn't even see his tail. Want to give it a try? Yi Ning shook the key in his hand. Mandu rubbed his hands together, that's for sure. But not this Koenigsegg, I'll just try the big G. It's fine, just drive it. Yi Ning looked indifferent. Meng Du, however, shook his head. Koenigsegg he really dare not open, not even open, his hand is shaking. Something that was more than $100 million, how could it be a small matter? Received the keys to the Mercedes-Benz Big G, Meng Du just sat in, closed his eyes to feel the spaciousness and comfort that this car brought him. He was already lanky, so this kind of car was only comfortable to drive. Really tie pants spicy. Let's go. Yi Ning sat in the passenger seat and closed the door. Okay. Mandu then a gesture, foot on the gas, whistling away. Half an hour later, the two arrived at an apartment in the west of the city. Chapter 63 Su Wire wants to take a shower? Let's go up and have a seat. At the door of the apartment, Meng Du had a cigarette in his mouth and invited. Yi Ning shook his head, forget it, you have a fitness class later. After saying that, Yi Ning took out a folder-sized red envelope from the trunk and handed it to Meng Du. You and your sister-in-law are getting married, so I'll pay my share first. It's still 2 months away. It's okay, you take it. Yi Ning shoved it hard into Meng Du's hand. He quickly got into the car and ran away without looking back. Meng Du faced confused. Yi Ning taillights cannot see before reacting, this red envelope seems to be too large. The first thing you need to do is to get your hands on a new one, and then you'll be able to get your hands on a new one. Then how much money does this have to be? Went upstairs with trepidation. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that. Tang Yuran opened the door, the first time to notice the red envelope in the hands of Meng Du. What is this? What is this? Such a big red envelope, she suspected that she looked at it wrong. Meng Du shook his head. Yi Ning sent, I have not opened. It's really a red packet. But the size of it was exaggerated. Is it all money? Tang Yuran asked. If it's all money, there's at least more than $100,000. I don't know, I haven't opened it yet. Saying this, Meng Du placed the red envelope on the table and carefully opened it. Vaguely, a flash of dark red. Meng Du drew out a look, but it was a Foursquare real estate license. There were also a couple of title transfer contracts and a bunch of keys. The couple's pupils shrunk slightly, and after looking at each other, they slowly opened the real estate certificate. On the real estate certificate, the names of the two of them were clearly written. Meng Du and Tang Yuran simultaneously gulped and opened their mouths, not knowing what to do. Emerald City. 400 square feet. Head of household, Meng Du and Tang Yuran. Every time they looked down a line, the couple's hearts couldn't stop fluttering and pounding once. This also Meng Du can't even say anything for a while. Quickly, call Yi Ning, how can we accept this nearly $10 million? Tang Yuran came back to her senses, her face anxious, constantly tapping Meng Du's shoulder. A pair of jade feet stomped on the floor. Oh well, I'll call now. Meng Du pulled out his cell phone and dialed Yi Ning's number. Yi Ning drove his car, saw Meng Du's call, and pressed the connect button. Hello? Boss, what's wrong? What? You still have the nerve to say what's wrong? Do you realize that Mandu is yelling into the receiver? Hello? Hello? Boss? What did you say? Hello? It's too windy here, I can't hear you. Boss, I'm hanging up now. Beep beep beep. Mandu and Tang Yuran. Mandu gritted his teeth and dialed the phone again. Hello, the number you have dialed is in the middle of a call. Well, Yi Ning directly added Meng Du's phone to the blacklist, and then released it after the wedding. This kid, so ruthless. Meng Du grinned, speechless. On the other end of the phone, Yi Ning laughed and flung the phone to the side. Fighting me, boss, you're still a bit young. Driving to Emerald City, I haven't seen Su Wei yet today, and I miss her. Knock knock knock. Who is it? Inside the house, Su Wei's voice is as clear as a silver bell. Hubby is here, why don't you greet her quickly? Clang. Su Wei saw Yi Ning's cheap smile and gave him a blank look. However, the elation in her heart still couldn't be hidden, and her face was full of smiles. Where is Auntie? Yi Ning looked around and didn't see Yu Qiu's figure. Just left yesterday, come on in. Su Wire took the initiative to hold Yi Ning's hand and dragged him into the house. Just after sitting on the sofa, Su Wire hugged his waist and pillowed Yi Ning's chest, burying her head in his arms. Why are you so proactive today? Yi Ning asked in surprise. After a long time, only came Su Wire's mosquito whispering like glutinous voice. I want my husband. Hiss. This girl, the killing power is too big. Yi Ning couldn't help but kiss her forehead, and wrapped his arms around Su Wire's waist. Unexpectedly, Su Wire suddenly struggled to get up and turned around to sit on Yi Ning's lap. After staring at Yi Ning's face for a while, she then took the initiative to stick her ice-soft red lips on Yi Ning's mouth. Well. The two of them lingered for a long time before Su Wire let go. Her small face was scarlet, but she still arrogantly said, How is it? Is my technique getting better? Yi Ning was thunderstruck by today's Su Wire. How did this niece change her nature? Suddenly being so proactive caught him off guard. Of course, he also enjoyed this. I don't think I have the M attribute, do I? I don't have the M attribute, do I? It's indeed quite a bit more powerful. Yi Ning complimented with a bad smile. Su Wire was smug and proudly tossed her hair. That's right, I looked to my mom for lessons. Yi Ning was shocked. This kind of thing can also find parents to teach? This silly girl, also too tiger. But mother-in-law is also, how can she teach so well? The two embraced each other in the living room until the evening, after having a meal. Yi Ning got up. Are you leaving? Su Wire asked with a face of reluctance. Aren't you going to start broadcasting live? Not broadcasting today. Fine, then I'll stay and accompany you. Yi Ning sat down again and just reached out to hug Su Wire, but she twisted her body. Like a loach, she slipped and dodged. Su Wire stood up and silently walked around the corner in Yi Ning's puzzled eyes. After a long time, before revealing a small head, stammered for half a day, gathered courage, red-faced whispered. You first watch TV, I go take a shower. Said, whoosh, a moment disappeared. Only vaguely came bathroom door closing sound, and the sound of water. Yi Ning froze for a long time. A shower? Aha! The bath. Chapter 64 An assist from mother-in-law. Hearing the sound of clattering running water coming from the bathroom, Yi Ning couldn't sit still. He couldn't even watch Crayola playing with elephants anymore, and stood up to pace back and forth between the living room and the balcony. Could Su Wire not have brought a bath towel? Should I go deliver it? The point is, obviously each bedroom has a separate toilet and bathroom. Su Wire preferred to bathe in the public bathroom. Was this another hint? Plus, her unusual behavior today is clearly to provoke an honest man like Yi Ning to make a mistake. Eating the marrow to know the flavor. Since having a relationship with Mo Qingqing, Yi Ning hasn't touched a woman yet. It's been more than half a month, and it's true that the old comrade is suffocating. Forget it, it's better to take a shower to calm down. Yi Ning casually found a bedroom and entered the bathroom to take a shower. Half an hour later, Yi Ning's eyes were incomparably clear and he walked out of the bathroom in his pajamas. This cold shower could indeed lower the fire. Just about to look in the mirror, only to hear a snap. The lights went out. Yi Ning was uncertain and looked around. Through the moonlight, vaguely see a vague silhouette standing quietly in the doorway. Under the fine smell, there is a faint fragrance. The aroma is far away and makes one's heart flutter and reminisce. Where? Yi Ning couldn't help but gulp. What did this niece want? He had only just lowered the fire. Su Wire stood in place, silent for a long time. Finally, she sighed softly and asked with a sobbing voice, Yi Ning, why don't you come and peek? Yi Ning? Could it be that going to peek is the right option? Wouldn't I be worse than a beast? Where, you? Yi Ning hadn't even finished speaking when a fragrant breeze hit him and pounced into his arms. It was only at this moment that Yi Ning realized that Su Wire was actually without an inch of clothing. Smooth skin, willow-like waist, stunning face, and the towering peaks. All of them stimulated Yi Ning's nerves. Well. Violet. Yi Ning, take me. I'm going to buy something. I'm going to go buy something. Yi Ning of course will not be inked again, all this time, what still pretend to be a gentleman? No, my mom has already bought it. Su Wire's face is hot, red like the evening sunset. Although there was only a vague moonlight now, Yining still saw it clearly. This woman, I really don't know how she, who is usually extremely easily shy, was able to muster up so much courage this night. Auntie, oh no, mother-in-law, I give you credit. Just as Yining gently placed Su Wei'er onto the soft and gentle silk quilt bed, the cell phone suddenly rang. Yining phone. Does not answer. Aya, pick it up, in case there's an emergency. Su Wei'er pushed Yining's chest and persuaded him. In her opinion, it was already good that a big boss like Yining could often spend time with her. It must have been busy on weekdays, squeezing out free time. Now that someone was calling, it might be something important in the company. Okay. Yining's face huffed and picked up the phone without looking at who it was. Who? What's going on? Being interrupted at a critical moment, it would be strange if Yining's tone could be good. Ha, Lao San, although you pulled the black my phone, did not expect me to take your sister-in-law's phone to call over it. On the other end of the phone, Meng Du's cheerful laughter came. Even if Yining hadn't turned on the speakerphone, Su Wei'er could hear it clearly. Tilting her head again, she saw that Yining's face was pitch black, with more black lines on his forehead than she could count. She almost couldn't help but laugh out loud. Mundu! Yining yelled into the phone, gritting his teeth and saying, "Get as far away from me as you want. If you dare to call again, I will call you every day at night from now on until you eat tiger bien." Said, snapped and hung up the phone, threw it aside. Staring at the happy Su Wei'er underneath her, a fierce light was released in her eyes. Licking his mouth, he revealed his fangs. Like to laugh, right, later to see if you can still laugh. Yining, don't, I was wrong. Su Wei'er feigned a timid appearance. It's no use admitting your mistake, but tonight's fire was lit by your own hands. The spring breeze brushed by, and the leaves of the trees rustled. Under the quiet night sky, there were only 3 or 2 kittens purring in a thought-provoking manner. On the other side of the phone, Meng Du was directly scolded and confused. What is the situation of this Nima? Even if you really don't want to return the real estate license yourself, you don't need to be so angry, right? He could hear that Yining was really angry. Can a joke between 2 brothers be like this? No way. I have to make another call to ask for clarification. My brother and sister's feelings cannot fade. Tang Yuan, who was next to him, heard some meaning in Yining's words. She grabbed the cell phone and gave Meng Du a blank look. Why is this person so naive? If you call now, maybe you guys will really be friends. Ha? Why? Tang Yuan shook his head breathlessly, too lazy to talk to this Guawazi, Sichuan province words, fools, but not cursing, affectionate name. Explain. The next day, the morning sun was first appearing. Yining opened his eyes and stretched his waist, cozy. After half a month, finally tasting meat again, this was too good. Su Wei'er in her arms had not yet woken up, her beautiful eyes were tightly closed, her long eyelashes curved, very cute. Yining stared for a long time, and really couldn't help himself, coming up to kiss her smooth forehead. Chapter 65 Encountering Zhao Na. At this time, Yining saw Su Wei'er's tightly closed eye slits keep jumping, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but raise. The little face with a smile was red and glowing. It turned out that this girl had woken up a long time ago, and refused to open her eyes because she was embarrassed. Yining smiled evilly, his playfulness rising. Both hands reached into the quilt, scratching hard at Su Wei'er's waist. Ha, Yining, don't, let go, ha. Don't tickle me, I am afraid of itching, ha. With a little playfulness, Su Wei'er almost laughed out of her eyes. Her delicate body kept moving backwards, wanting to escape Yining's clutches. Suddenly, Su Wei'er turned around, her body lightened, and she fell off the bed. Yining reacted quickly and lunged forward. Reaching out, he wrapped his hand around Su Wei'er's slender waist and lifted upward with force. Su Wei'er's entire body fell into Yining's arms. Yining gently patted Su Wei'er on the back. Yining gently patted Su Wei'er's bare back and said soothingly. Su Wei'er shook her head and said, "Yeah, I'm fine." Su Wei'er said that she was fine, but her small heart was beating nonstop. If her heart rate was measured now, it would be at least 120 or more. Of course, it wasn't being scared by almost falling off the bed just now. Rather, it was because both of them were openly facing each other and embracing each other. She could clearly feel every muscle on Yining's body, and it was too much to be shy about. Hearing that Su Wei'er hadn't bumped into anything, Yining breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to pull her away from his arms, he realized that Su Wei'er was hugging him even tighter. Don't be shy, Su Weier's pair of tender white lotus root arms wrapped tightly around Yining's neck. The entire person was hanging onto Yining. The tip of Yining's ear was pressed against Su Weier's soft and delicate cheeks. It could clearly feel the temperature of her face, which was red hot. This girl was so bold last night, and now she was so shy that she didn't dare to look at him. Yining couldn't help but laugh, patting her back. Pulling the ice silk cool quilt up, he draped it over Su Weier's back. Holding her body, she slowly lay down on her side. Until Yining washed up and came to the dormitory to see Su Weier still lying on the bed. Her hands were tightly tugging at the cool quilt, only revealing half of her nose and eyes. Yining smiled and came to the bedside to sit down, using his fingertips to gently help Su Weier smooth a few wisps of messy hair on her forehead. You're not getting up yet? You go out first, I will get up later. Su Weier's eyes flickered, somewhat afraid to look at him. Yining smiled and nodded, okay, then I will go to the supermarket to buy food, and come back to cook for you. Su Weier softly staring at Yining, wanting to speak. Yining drifted off, walked into Su Weier's room, and took out a set of clean little clothes in the closet drawer. Putting it on the sofa next to the bed. Leaning down, he was about to kiss her forehead, but Su Weier pulled down the covers slightly, revealing her beautiful red lips. Yining was first stunned, then couldn't help but smile as he pressed his face over. Well. The cold and sweet touch, coupled with the aroma that Su Weier's body exuded all the time, made Yining a little more intent. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to hold back again if he didn't get up. Lips parted. Slapped Su Weier's jutting arches across the quilt and said with a smile, "Little demon. Get up and leave." Hearing the sound of the door closing, Su Weier slowly climbed out of bed. Gently opening the door, she poked her head out and cautiously looked into the living room. Only when she saw that there was no movement did she finally breathe a sigh of relief. Immediately afterward, her brows tightened. Hiss. A hint of pain made her unable to hold back a breath of cool air. Enduring the pain, she walked into the bathroom. On this side of the university city, there were many school district houses, and naturally there were supporting supermarkets. Yining didn't drive and walked for more than 10 minutes to get there. This supermarket was very large, with a total of 5 floors, divided into layers. Yining only needed to buy fresh vegetables, so he came directly to the 3rd floor. Thinking that Su Weier had just experienced her first time, Yining bought some pork ribs and radish stew. Just as he walked to the meat counter, a familiar figure caught his attention. The woman was wearing a white shirt, jeans, and a small bag on her waist, very competent. But at this moment, she had a sad look on her face and was about to leave after receiving the pig's feet handled by the waiter. "Jana, long time no see, actually met you here." Yining walked up to its side and greeted it with a smile. Zhao Na was his ex-girlfriend He Man-man's best friend. Although Yining looked down on He Man-man's kind of money-minded woman, he still had a good feeling about Zhao Na. This girl was cheerful, hard-working, and very progressive. In the past, when he and He Man-man were together, they had even helped themselves quite a bit. To Zhao Na, he was grateful from the bottom of his heart. Yining. Zhao Na turned around and saw Yining for a moment, not daring to recognize him. After not seeing him for a long time, Yining had changed a bit too much. Not only was his face more handsome, but his temperament was completely different from before. Although she knew that Yining was now very rich, after all, he had also sent her a piece of tens of thousands of dollars of Vacheron Constantine. But now that Yining was wearing this famous brand, she could naturally tell that it had to be at least $200,000 or more. How much money does he have? What, can't recognize me? Seeing that Zhao Na didn't say anything, Yining smiled and waved his hand in front of her eyes. Some of you don't dare to recognize me, you're not on the same level as us at all now. Zhao Na, who had returned to her senses, slapped away Yining's hand and shook her head. Yining was speechless. What tier is this? Can I still be a god in the sky? The achievements you've reached now are like having divine help to me. Yining was developing too fast, and in Zhao Na's opinion, even if he didn't have the blessing of a god, it was still smoke coming out of his ancestors' graves. Chapter 66 A man is a teenager until he dies. Yining was shocked in his heart. Everything he had came from the help of the system, and thinking about it like this, wasn't it just like having divine help? Zhao Na didn't know that she had almost guessed correctly when she made a random comment. By the way, how to see you sad face, dumped by your boyfriend? Yining pulled away from the topic and joked. In his impression, Zhao Na had always been the kind of character with a big grin. All day long, she was like a happy fruit, the kind that could chat with anyone, Seeing her with this expression of bitterness and hatred was really rare. Hearing Yining's words, Zhao Na looked complicated. After a while, she said, "Yining, can you go with me to see Man Man? She's in a bad way right now." Yining was originally curious, and if Zhao Na had any difficulties, he would definitely step in if he could help. But when he heard that it was about Man Man, he immediately felt like he had eaten chicken ribs. It was tasteless. "I won't go, bye." Yining picked up the shopping bag and turned to leave. Unexpectedly, Zhao Na grabbed Yining's arm and begged, "Wait a minute, Yining Man, she just had surgery, so." Yining sneered, "Do I have a relationship with her? What happened to having surgery? Could it still be an abortion? Could it still be my seed? Let me tell you, Zhao Na, I can't thank you enough for taking care of me in the past. But it has nothing to do with anyone else. If you have any difficulties, just tell me, as long as I can do it, I'll do my best to help you. But not her, Man. I don't have half a penny to do with her, and with that said, I hope you won't use her to consume the friendship between the two of us." After saying that, Yining broke away from Zhao Na's hand and left without looking back. Zhao Na was stagnant, standing in place, looking at Yining's distant back, and remained silent for a long time. Yining checked out and walked out of the supermarket, feeling a little heavy. It wasn't that she still had feelings for Man, but she felt that her words to Zhao Na were heavy. She had always had a good relationship with Man, and now that Man was in poor health, she was also in a hurry. Thinking of this, Yining picked up his phone and sent an apologetic text message to Zhao Na. "Zhao Na, I'm sorry, I was a bit excited today and said a few heavy words, I hope you don't take it to heart." It's fine." 2 minutes later, Yining received Zhao Na's reply, smiled slightly, and walked towards Emerald City. Returning to Su Weier's home, he saw her, who had just gotten out of the shower, standing in front of the mirror fiddling with her blow-dryer. Yining walked over and took the hairdryer in Su Weier's hand, lifting her hair to help her dry it. This scene, as if it was somewhat familiar. At once, Yining remembered Mo Qingqing from Yangchang. At that time, at the Golden Sun Hotel, he had also helped Mo Qingqing blow out her hair in this way. What's wrong? Seeing that Yining was standing still, Su Weier wondered. Yining returned to his senses, or no. Continued the work on his hands. Through the mirror, Su Weier naturally saw Yining's appearance as he grabbed her hair out of focus. Shrugging the tip of her nose, her nostrils gently hummed, and she didn't say anything more. This big bad guy must have helped other women blow-dry their hair. Darn it! Darn it! Darn it! Seeing Su Weier with a puffed-up and cute expression, staring at herself in the mirror, milking her fierce face. Yining was amused and embarrassed at the same time. Grabbing Su Weier's hair, and remembering Mo Qingqing, what is this? It is said that a man is a teenager until he dies, and the ancients honestly do not deceive me. It's okay. Yining put the blow-dryer on the sink, slightly leaned over, and encircled Su Weier's waist from behind. Angry? Humph. Su Weier raised her eyebrows. In your place, what would you do? Yining smiled sarcastically and scratched the back of his head. He laughed twice and stopped explaining. Su Weier was a bit helpless, this big bad guy, really hateful. But coincidentally, she also liked it, this find who to say reason to go? Especially after last night, the car is on, the ticket is not refundable. By now, Su Weier doesn't want to think that much. As long as she can stay with Yining, she is already satisfied. I'm going to go cook for you, so you can go watch some TV first. He was about to let go of his hands, but Su Weier's hands ended up pulling him back. Tutaying her mouth, she expressed her dissatisfaction. Seeing this look on her face, Yining once again hugged her tightly, finding her peach-like cherry lips and taking in a mouthful. Only after a few minutes did Yining let go of Su Weier and turn towards the kitchen. Seeing Yining walk out of the bathroom, Su Weier felt her legs go a little soft. Looking up at herself in the mirror, her pupils were sparkling and watery. The beautiful collarbone looked like it was tinted with a reddish haze, extending all the way to the tips of her ears. Applying both hands to her face, she couldn't believe for a moment that such a bold person was actually herself. Alas! Blame it on her mom coming over the other day. Gave her a sparse indoctrination into the affairs of men and women. Even the little umbrella was properly prepared. Now well, the big bad wolf finally ate Little Red Riding Hood. Yining came to the kitchen and saw freshly washed covers and sheets hanging on the living balcony outside the glass door. It was clearly the same set that he and Su Weier had slept on last night. Under the bright sunlight, in the center of the bedsheets, a little dark red mark was faintly visible. Chapter 67. Tonight I'll wear it for you to see, okay? Only at noon, in the midst of Yi Ning's call, did Su Wire wriggle out of the bedroom. Seeing the steaming pork rib soup on the table, she looked incredulous. In the morning, when Yi Ning had said that he was going to buy vegetables for cooking, she had thought that it would be one of those half-finished products. She didn't expect that Yi Ning, who was a big boss, would actually cook. And the selling looks were quite good. Coupled with the clear aroma of bone soup mixed with radish that filled the restaurant, Su Wire couldn't help but gulp. Seeing Su Wire frozen in place, Yi Ning smiled and pulled her to sit beside him. Then he personally filled a bowl and placed it in front of her. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and eat. Do you want me to feed you? No, I don't. Su Wire knew that Yi Ning was teasing her again, and arrogantly denied it. She picked up a piece of meat and put it in her mouth. The far-reaching aroma of the meat combined with the sweetness of the soup made her big, watery eyes instantly light up. This is too delicious. Yi Ning's cooking could actually be this delicious? Seeing Su Wire's reaction, Yi Ning knew that this meal was very much to her taste. His fingertips hooked up the strands of hair plastered to his cheeks and moved them behind Su Wire's small ears. Revealing her white-as-fat side face with a straight nose, she sketched out a perfect picture of innocence and beauty. Su Wire felt an itch on her face, but she didn't reject it. Instead, she felt very comfortable, her heart rejoicing with joy. After lunch, Su Wire stuck in Yi Ning's arms, and the unique sweetness of the fragrance hit her nose, making Yi Ning unable to resist palpitating. Su Wire naturally felt the difference in Yi Ning's body, and her pretty face was instantly dyed red. Shyly, she inclined her head and quietly glanced at Yi Ning. Ahem. Yi Ning laughed dryly and explained, force majeure, force majeure. He had thought that Su Wire would say a few words about him, but not only did she not say anything, but instead, she hooked her hand back around Yi Ning's neck. Next to his ear, she chirped, Yi Ning, that day my mom also bought me a few clothes. Tonight I will wear them for you to see, okay? Boom. Su Wire's words were like winks, causing him to instantly break his defenses. Good. Yi Ning's throat was dry and burning with desire. For the next few days, Yi Ning stayed at Su Wire's home. It wasn't for any particular purpose, but after her daily live broadcasts were over, he could give her a good massage to ease her fatigue. On this day, Yi Ning took Su Wire for a walk in the square. Suddenly, a roar of an engine was heard. Immediately afterward, a red Ferrari 599 whizzed past the road. Yi Ning was slightly surprised. This was the second Ferrari he had seen in Jiangcheng. The other one was Bai Yiluo's white Ferrari 488. Although Jiangcheng was not big, there were still quite a few rich people. Like Han Yu, several people, what big bull calf, Porsche, these luxury cars are there. Just at this time, Yi Ning's phone rang. Hello? Old Han, looking for me what? Yi brother, the phone. Han Yu tone sounds a little weak. Ink half a day, Yi Ning simply said, what you say straight, a big man, talking how so pussy? Just finished, I saw Su Wire's beautiful eyes glaring at him, white jade fingers have been placed on Yi Ning's waist. Yi Ning was embarrassed and laughed twice, using his lips, he said wordlessly, wife, I'm just kidding. Seeing Yi Ning call her wife, Su Wire's small face reddened, and the corners of her mouth rose a few points before she put down the hand on Yi Ning's waist. Aya, let me say it if you are embarrassed. At this time, Yi Ning heard Zhou Chen's impatient voice. Zhou Chen grabbed Han Yu's cell phone. Hey, brother Yi, this is Zhou Chen. We'd like to borrow your Koenigsegg to drive it. Hey, is that all? Yi Ning was speechless. This is a small matter. Han Yu, that kid also need to ink half a day? Just take it and drive it. When do you want it? Yi Ning asked directly. Han Yu, a few people did not expect Yi Ning so dry. On this more than a small target, Koenigsegg 11 does not care in the slightest. They were all prepared to give Yi Ning some money to rent a car, but the result was that Yi Ning didn't even think about lending it to them. There was no half-hearted hesitation, nor did he open any conditions. Brother Yi, thank you so much. The duo of Liu Xian and Ai Yang were also on the sidelines, and were very pleasantly surprised. Brother Yi, it's tomorrow, there's a race car on East Mountain tomorrow, do you want to come and see it then as well? Han Yu asked. I won't go, you come to Dragon View on the cloud tomorrow morning, the 7th floor is mine. Brother Yi. You're really bullish, buying a house in Longjing on clouds. Hearing Yi Ning's words, Han Yu couldn't help but worship. His family was very rich, but they wouldn't spend close to $100 million on a house. Because the money was on the company's books, $100 million could solve a lot of unexpected problems. But for Yi Ning to not only buy a car with over 100 million, but also a house with close to 100 million, this was no longer something that could be described as rich. It was going to take a very large amount of cash flow to back it up. Since Yi Ning would buy it, it meant that he had even more cash to use as a logistical support. The two chatted for a few moments and hung up. Yi Ning, are you going back tonight? Su Weier heard Yi Ning tell Han Yu to go to Dragon View on the clouds tomorrow morning, so he shouldn't be staying overnight in Emerald City tonight. Well, I'm going back to the villa tonight, but you'll have to come with me. Yi Ning hooked Su Weier's glossy chin and said with a smile. Chapter 68 The Law of True Fragrance. Su Weier. This big bad guy. Teasing me anytime, anywhere. Su Weier, won't eat this, I'll just walk back from here, and I won't go to the villa with you. Half an hour later, Yi Ning drove the Mercedes-Benz Big G, carrying Su Weier on the passenger side towards Dragon View on the clouds. On the back seat, there was also a black plastic bag. The bag was not only filled with Su Weier's change of clothes, but also Tukas, and if you looked carefully, there were even cat ears and cat tails. Su Weier put her face to the side and closed her eyes, not daring to look at Yi Ning. Just a pair of delicate catkins that had nowhere to rest, had long since rubbed the corners of her clothes to the point of crumpling. With a slightly blinkered eye, she could see Yi Ning's evil smile in the rearview mirror. Pervert! Su Weier cursed in her heart. I really don't know where Yi Ning learned these tricks. Tossing her around in different ways every day, does she really not know how tired she is? And then there was her own mother who didn't look like her own mother, who had bought so many strange things, not knowing any shame at all. She seemed to have forgotten that a few days ago, it was she herself who took the initiative to wear these clothes. Yi Ning's desire to be curious was aroused, and he was out of control. These days Su Weier ordered more than 20 sets of good-looking costumes. What stewardesses, nurses, cat-eared ladies, all kinds, everything. Tonight, it was destined to be another battle of hundreds of millions of soldiers and horses. The next day, Yi Ning rubbed his messy hair and sat up with a yawn. Inside the room, clothes were thrown everywhere. It was evident that last night, the battle had been so intense. Su Weier was smiling, sleeping deeply. The cool quilt covered half of her body, not realizing in the slightest that it had revealed a snowy white piece. Yi Ning's eyes hurt from the white flowers, so he took a deep breath and pulled the quilt on for her. Knowing that Su Weier was exhausted last night, Yi Ning carefully got up. At 10 in the morning, Han Yu arrived at Yi Ning's villa. Coming to the garage where the Koenigsegg 11 was kept, the four of them were excited. Especially the moment Yi Ning handed over the key to him, Han Yu simply wanted to kneel down and sing his conquest. In front of this car, their Lamborghini instantly didn't smell good. Han Yu sat in the driver's cab, his hands on the steering wheel, the ultimate touch, so that one could not help but close his eyes and enjoy it. Before he even started, Han Yu felt a few moments of relief. Brother Yi, are you really not going with us? Han Yu asked again. Do not go. Yi Ning's attitude makes Han Yu several people puzzled. A super rich man who owned a Koenigsegg 11 was not even interested in racing. Then what's the point of buying this car? Is it just for pretending? Seems like it could indeed. The next moment Yi Ning explained, you guys go play, I'm going to accompany your sister-in-law. Brother Yi, you actually have a girlfriend. Aside from Han Yu, Zhou Chen and a few others didn't know that Yi Ning was in a relationship. Although Han Yu had mentioned it before, and even bluntly said that Yi Ning's girlfriend was particularly beautiful. But how could they believe it? Just ask, would anyone give up an entire forest for a single tree? Now that it came from Yi Ning's own mouth, they believed it. No wonder Yi Ning hadn't been interested in the escort girl at the Red Cherry Bar. It was called being dedicated to one's love. But how do they know that Yi Ning doesn't only have one girlfriend, but is also bent on having a few people live in harmony? Yi Ning Villa second floor, Su Weier heard Yi Ning's voice, put on her pajamas, and poked her little head out of the window. Seeing Han Yu's few people, she smiled and nodded, hello guys. Sister-in-law good. Han Yu's four greeted. Okay, you guys go quickly. Yi Ning waved his hand, not even asking when he would return the car. Leaving the clouds on the Dragon King, Zhou Chen sat on the passenger side of the Koenigsegg 11, pondering. What is it? Han Yu glanced at him and asked. Old Han, why do I think that Brother Yi's girlfriend looks so familiar? Although he had only greeted and met once, Zhou Chen always felt that Yi Ning's girlfriend looked quite familiar. Especially the voice that spoke seemed to have been heard somewhere as well. It had to be said that Yi Ning's girlfriend was really pretty. It was reasonable to say that such a good-looking woman should have remembered it once he had seen it. Strange. Hanyu mysteriously smiled. You contact sister-in-law's name, think again? Name? Zhou Chen frowned. Su Wire, well, is there anything special about the name? Wait a minute. After a while, Zhou Chen seemed to think of something. His eyes stared like bronze bells. Old Han, sister-in-law wouldn't be that little Violet from the flying fish platform? Right. It must be her. Without waiting for Hanyu to answer, Zhou Chen clenched his right hand into a fist and slapped the heart of his left hand with a face of certainty. No wonder it looks a bit familiar. Surprisingly, it's that superb anchor that has recently caught fire. Zhou Chen had an incredulous face. Not only because of Su Weier's stunningly beautiful face, which was no less beautiful than the one under the camera, and even a few points more beautiful. And it was also because Yi Ning felt admiration for being able to make Su Weier his girlfriend. This was a true goddess-level character. Not to mention status, but in terms of face value alone, he, Zhou Chen, hadn't seen a few beauties of this level. Only Ai Yang's sister's best friend, that Jiangcheng University schoolflower, could compare. Or, it was the one they were about to see tonight, the big sister who was like a leprechaun and loved to race cars. Thinking of that red phantom, Zhou Chen's neck couldn't help but shrink slightly, as if he had remembered something terrible. Chapter 69 Hello Goblin. The next day, Yi Ning unexpectedly received a call from Lu Jiandong. It turned out that this old fox was inviting him to attend the shareholders' meeting tomorrow morning. Yi Ning owned 15% of the shares of Anshin Pharmaceuticals, counting him as the third largest shareholder of Anshin Pharmaceuticals, so naturally he would be invited. Mr. Yi, let's make a deal then. When the time comes, you will not help each other. When I take the position of chairman, I will double your dividends. Don't worry, I'm the most honest. After lunch, Hanyu drove the Koenigsegg 11 back to Yi Ning's place. Yi Ning took the key and was about to say goodbye when he suddenly saw a red handbag lying under the passenger seat. Wait. Yi, what's wrong? Where is the problem? Hanyu thought that he had accidentally rubbed somewhere, and his heart tightened. This car, even if you rub off a little paint, is not cheap. Don't be nervous, it's fine. Yi Ning patted his shoulder and bent down to pick up the handbag. Just who is this thing? Ah. Hanyu's forehead broke out in a cold sweat. Yi Ning was puzzled. What's wrong? Hanyu sighed. You brother, I will tell you the truth. This car was not only a few of us drove last night. It turned out that they went racing last night and ran into a woman. Who originally drove a Ferrari, but when she saw the Koenigsegg 11, her eyes lit up and she was eager to try it out. We are all acquaintances, and the woman left a horrible impression on Hanyu and the others, so they had to lend it to her for 2 laps. Hearing that it was a Ferrari, Yi Ning's first reaction was Bai Iluo. But thinking that Bai Iluo shouldn't be the kind of person who liked to race cars, then there was only the owner of the Ferrari 599 that he had seen in the square before. All right. Explain clearly. Yi Ning will not say anything. This bag is also that woman's? Yes, it's Annie's. Seeing that Yi Ning did not blame, Hanyu's heart was relieved. Sister Annie? Could it be an XIN Pharmaceuticals chairman, Annie? Yi Ning looked surprised. It's her, brother Yi, you know her too? I don't recognize. Yi Ning shook his head. Just heard that her father had a car accident, and now she is in Anshin Pharmaceuticals is not good. Of course it's not good. In the morning, Lu Jiandong called, which is clearly to convene a shareholders meeting to shift the center of power. And she must be very busy right now, right? Oh, my God. Indeed. Hanyu sighed helplessly. If it wasn't for the Lu family, Sister Annie wouldn't be like this today. Yi Ning nodded, but in his heart, he didn't care. Who cares, anyway? He was sitting on the mountain watching the tigers fight. It didn't matter who won. He was about to hand the bag to Hanyu when he suddenly saw a big head sticker on the strap. Yi Ning's hands trembled, his eyes flashed with starlight and excitement. His eyes looked straight at Hanyu, pointing at the woman in the photo, his tone trembling. This is Annie? Yes, brother Yi, what happened to you? Hanyu has never seen this state of Yi Ning. Yi Ning is rarely happy. When he encountered something he was happy about, he wouldn't get excited like this, right? Could it be that Yi Ning has something to do with Annie? It's fine. Yi Ning held back his excitement, chatted with Hanyu for a few moments, and said goodbye to each other. Returning to the villa, Yi Ning placed his handbag on the bedside and looked at her big headshot, his expression incomparably tender. On the photo, she had a head of burgundy wavy curls and a red plain dress. Standing there quietly, she exuded an irresistible demonic charm. Eyes contemptuous, as if the world does not care. This kind of appearance, and that the journey to the west in the Goblin's generally the same. Goblin, hello. Goblin, I finally found you. And was the woman who had gone crazy with Yi Ning one night after he had lost both his job and his love life. And it was her first time. The two of them hadn't said a few words in total, but this leprechaun's knitted brows and smile, every word and sentence was firmly imprinted in his mind. Annie was his Yi Ning's woman. She could only be bullied by herself, no one else could come. So Lu Jiandong, your calculations are good, but this time they're destined to fall flat. As for integrity? Did he need to speak about integrity with someone who bullied his own daughter-in-law? On the following day, Yi Ning woke up very early, and after sending Su Weier back to Emerald City, he drove towards Anqin Pharmaceuticals alone. It was during the morning rush hour at work, and the road was jammed with traffic. The original 40-minute journey took at least an hour or so to arrive. Anqin Pharmaceuticals. Jiangqing's largest pharmaceutical company, the cooperation object is not only Jiangqing's large and small hospitals, in the neighboring provinces still have not small reputation. It was only in the past year that Anqin Pharmaceuticals' stock price had plummeted, and was much worse than its peak. Yi Ning had just parked his car when he saw a small BMW pull up next to his car. Walking out was none other than Xiao Tong, who Yi Ning had met several times. She had put on makeup, but it still couldn't hide the fatigue on her face. Not to mention, those worried eyes could make people feel sad even from a distance. Hi Director Xiao, good morning. Yi Ning waved at Xiao Tong with a smile on his face. Only then did Xiao Tong see a young man in a suit with an excellent face value and temperament walking towards her. Mr. Yi? Why are you here? Xiao Tong was surprised. Today's shareholders meeting, could it be that there are still people below looking for Jiangcheng Kangda Hospital to talk about business? Besides, who in the sales department had such great face? Who in the sales department had such great face that they could actually invite Yi Ning himself? Chapter 70 The first time I saw Lu Jiandong. Of course I came to see you, that day a goodbye, I simply day and night thinking. Yi Ning smiled and flirted. Xiao Tong deflated her mouth, not wanting to answer. If before that auction, she might still believe Yi Ning's words. But ever since she had met Su Weier at the auction, she no longer had these types of thoughts. Even though Xiao Tong was confident in her looks and body, she was very self-aware in front of Su Weier. The reason was simple, Su Weier was too beautiful. In particular, the pure aura revealed by her body was something that even Xiao Tong herself could not afford to destroy. It was a kind of fresh and unassuming beauty. Just like a lotus flower in a pond. In the street outside, no branches, incense far benefit Qing, pavilion net plant, can be seen from afar but not profane play. Such a girl cannot be blasphemed. If the appearance, and her top boss Annie can be comparable, then that youthful and beautiful clean, no one can compare. Try to ask, there is such a girlfriend Yi Ning, will still fall in love with other women? Obviously, Xiao Tong didn't know Yi Ning. If it was Yi Ning, he would have answered in the affirmative, yes. Because you, Mr. N, I love you too. Director Xiao, where is the shareholders meeting being held? Yi Ning asked. Xiao Tong was speculating about Yi Ning's purpose for coming to Anqin Pharmaceuticals, and was slightly surprised to hear Yi Ning's words, but didn't ask much. It's in the office hall, I'm going there too, let's go together. Xiao Tong replied. Yi Ning nodded, it was good to have someone to lead the way. Along the way, many of the employees threw strange looks at the duo. Xiao Tong, the beautiful young woman of Anqin Pharmaceuticals, was actually walking with a strange man. Moreover, this young man was a little too handsome. This, coupled with the faint smile that Yi Ning always wore on his face, caused many young unmarried women to admire him. There were speculations about Yi Ning's relationship with Xiao Tong. It had even been secretly rumored that Xiao Tong was so bold that she had openly brought her gigolo to the company. Yi Ning naturally ignored the remarks of others and followed Xiao Tong all the way to the office building without hindrance. Cough cough, Mr. Yi is sorry, there are more little girls in our company, and the atmosphere is just like this. Xiao Tong coughed dryly twice, somewhat embarrassed to explain. Yi Ning shook his head, he didn't care about the gossip. He was handsome in his own right, and there were plenty of rumors about him from his student days. If he had to dwell on every single one of them, he would have been twisted into twisted candy long ago. Mr. Yi, may I ask which shareholder invited you? Xiao Tong hadn't thought about the fact that Yi Ning was a shareholder of the company. If he was a shareholder, would he never show up at the company? So, it should be a certain shareholder who asked Yi Ning to talk about cooperation. Ha ha, Director Xiao, why can't I be a shareholder? Yi Ning laughed out loud a few times, opened his cell phone text message and waved it in front of Miss Manners, signing and walking through the door. Seeing Yi Ning's series of operations in a flowing stream, Xiao Tong was dumbstruck. She racked her brain. No matter what, she could not imagine that Yi Ning was still her top boss. From being a former business partner, she was instantly demoted to becoming Yi Ning's hired hand. Yi Dong. Xiao Tong spoke in an obscure tone, not knowing what to say for a moment. Yi Ning waved his hand, his face indifferent. He had always been indifferent when it came to name calling. Ah, Yi Dong, welcome, welcome, welcome. Suddenly, a cheerful laugh resounded in the hall. A middle-aged man wearing a suit and glasses, dressed in an elegant and easygoing manner, stretched out his right hand as he walked towards Yi Ning. The corners of Yi Ning's mouth rose slightly with an inexplicable expression, but he also extended his hand. You are Lu Dong, right? It's better to hear 100 times than to see you. I've heard a lot about you. Two people, one old and one young, met in this hall in front of everyone. Although it is the first time they meet, it looks like they have been friends for a long time. Behind Lu Jiandong, several other shareholders also went forward, exchanging pleasantries with Yi Ning and showing him goodwill. Obviously, Lu Jiandong had introduced himself to them. At least the preparations had been done properly. At this moment, Lu Jiandong tapped the back of the head of the young man beside him. Lu Tianxian's body stiffened, and he looked at Yi Ning with very complicated eyes. It was this man who had caused himself to lose face at the auction. Not only that, but after being slapped by Yi Ning, he was also pulled into the small dark room and beaten. Afterward, instead of backing him up, his dad had even severely reprimanded him. Now he had to personally apologize. Even though Lu Tianxian had 10,000 reluctances, under the pressure of his dad, he still gritted his teeth and bowed to Yi Ning. Mr. Yi is sorry, that day it was me who bumped into you. I hope that you will be generous and forgive me. Toward the end, Lu Tianxian's tone was tinged with a sobbing tone, looking very aggrieved. But in order for his dad's plan not to be destroyed, apologizing to Yi Ning was his only way out. It's okay, it's normal for young people to be impulsive, and you should think about what you're doing in the future. Yi Ning replied in an old-fashioned manner. As the third largest shareholder of Anshin Pharmaceuticals, Yi Ning naturally will not put himself in the position of Lu Tianxian on this class. Right now, he was on equal footing with Lu Jiandong. It could be said that in the entire Anshin Pharmaceuticals, other than Lu Jiandong and Annie, the rest were all below him. Chapter 71 Panicked Xiao Tong. On the side, Xiao Tong's face changed slightly and quickly returned to normal. However, in her heart, she simply set off waves of shock. Just after the shock, there was also a deep concern about today's shareholders' meeting. Yi Ning was obviously invited by Lu Jiandong. Regardless of how many shares Yi Ning held in his hands, it was very likely that he was on Lu Jiandong's side. As the chairman of the board of directors, Annie, who was originally in a precarious position, was having an even more difficult time at this moment. Thinking of this, she gritted her teeth and walked towards Yi Ning. Yi Dong, I wonder if we can talk alone. Seeing Lu Jiandong and the others leave, Xiao Tong came to Yi Ning's side, inviting in a voice that only the two could hear. To outsiders, Xiao Tong's body was tightly attached to Yi Ning's body. In particular, the huge fullness that was crying out to be seen was on the verge of pinning Yi Ning's entire arm in it. So much so that Yi Ning could smell an inexplicable sweet fragrance. So intimate? These two people really did have a problem. In the face of the strange eyes around them, Xiao Tong's face flushed slightly. Still, she did not pull away from Yi Ning. The only way to pull Yi Ning into Annie's camp was to take advantage of the situation now. Oh? I wonder what Director Xiao wants to talk to me about. Yi Ning teased. Yi Dong, there are a lot of people here, can we go to my office to talk? Ha ha. Yi Ning shook his head and lost his smile. If you are trying to get me to support Annie, then there is no need to say anything. In front of everyone, Yi Ning directly spread the word. He knew what Xiao Tong was playing at, and he also saw Xiao Tong's determination. This was truly a devoted person. Yi Ning was very pleased that Annie's situation at Anshin Pharmaceuticals was not so bad that it was hopeless. At least there were still patriarchs like Xiao Tong, who had followed Annie's father before, who were willing to support her. Hearing Yi Ning's words, Xiao Tong's face turned as white as paper. She had been rejected before she had even said anything, and in front of so many employees. A trace of bitterness flowed through the corners of her mouth, Could it be that Mr. Ren would really be kicked out of the board of directors after today? Just as Xiao Tong fell into deep despair, Yi Ning asked, "Director Xiao, where is En's office? Can you take me there?" Hearing Yi Ning's words, Xiao Tong's eyes lit up. Could it be that there was still a turnaround in the situation? All right, I'll take you there," Xiao Tong said hurriedly, leading Yi Ning into the elevator. "Xiao Yan, is the chairman in?" Arriving outside Annie's office, Xiao Tong looked towards a young girl in her 20s and asked eagerly. Secretary Xiao Yan shook her head. "The chairman went to the conference room 2 minutes ago." "Ah. Alas." Xiao Tong looked disappointed. She believed that with Annie's skills, there was a good chance of pulling Yi Ning in. At the very least, she was able to make Yi Ning not stand on Lu Jiandong's side. As it turned out, coincidentally, Annie had gone to the conference room early. The only opportunity for negotiation was not grasped. It was likely that all efforts would go down the drain. Yi Ning, however, walked forward and smiled. "It's okay, I'm here to return something. Your chairman's bag was left here with me." Saying this, Yi Ning handed the small red purse in his hand to Xiao Yan. This scene took Xiao Tong and Secretary Xiao Yan both a bit by surprise. Anne's bag had been left at Yi Ning's place? Could it be that this man was on good terms with the chairman? The chairman was 27 years old and had never heard of any special interactions with any man. Only Lu Tianxian was like a cowhide, coming to annoy her from time to time. But Annie had never given Lu Tianxiang a good face. Could it be that Yi Ning was the reason Annie rejected other men? Xiao Tong even kept sizing up Yi Ning. She admitted that this man was very handsome, and sitting on a fortune of at least nearly $10 billion, he was a true young Jejuan. But didn't Yi Ning have a girlfriend? Could it be that this man was in 2 boats? Even one of the boats was the usually unsmiling, cold and scary Annie? This was also too unbelievable. But if that was the case, Yi Ning would definitely be on Annie's side. Perhaps he was today the biggest help in Annie's turnaround. Ahem, Yi Dong, you? Thinking of this, Xiao Tong looked at Yi Ning with a hopeful gaze. Yi Ning smiled mysteriously and said confidently, "As long as your chairman has 35% of the equity in her hands, then she can't lose today." Ah! The two beauties screamed out at the same time, almost jumping up in excitement. By saying this, Yi Ning had actually informed them that he had 15% equity in his hands. Together with the 37% stake that Anne had inherited from the old chairman, she had already secured a win over Lu Jiandong. Not to mention that there were several minority shareholders who were also on Annie's side. "Yi Dong, you are really handsome," Xiao Tong said from the bottom of her heart. No wonder Yi Ning had just said that he didn't need to say much if he was helping Annie. It turned out to be this meaning. Even Xiao Yan on the side kept nodding her little head. "Ah, don't praise it yet, there's an even more handsome one later." Yi Ning squeezed his eyes towards the two. Xiao Tong is already a mature woman in her 30s with a baby, and has been used to these for a long time, so she naturally has a certain resistance. But Xiao Yan was just a young girl who hadn't graduated from college for 2 years. When she met Yi Ning's eyes, her small face instantly turned red. Of course, a large part of the willingness was also because Yi Ning was just too handsome. Combined with his gangly expression, it made a world-weary little girl like Xiao Yan a bit too much to handle. Chapter 72 Finally seeing a good man. Until Xiao Tong and Yi Ning left An's office, the little secretary's face was still red. From this, it could be seen how shy this little girl was. As a senior member of Anshin Pharmaceuticals, although Xiao Tong was not a shareholder, she would also enter the conference room to observe the meeting. The large conference room had an oval red wooden table and more than 20 chairs in the center. Around it, the entire conference room was surrounded by 3 layers with dozens of small-sized tables and chairs. Obviously, the center was where the shareholders sat, surrounded by the seats of the company's management. Yi Ning and Xiao Tong came late. Many people got up to greet Xiao Tong, while some others did not move at all. Today, the conference room smelled of gunpowder. The atmosphere was tense and could be described as saber-rattling. As for Yi Ning, who was walking with Xiao Tong, many people took him to be some newly promoted junior executive. However, Yi Ning did not sit down at the outermost perimeter, but rather crossed over to Xiao Tong's position and walked straight to the very center. This move naturally caught the attention of many of the company's executives. There were even some who were already secretly sneering. Is Xiao Tong's promoted junior executive so bold? It's really a newborn calf that is not afraid of tigers. You're going to the toilet with a lantern, looking for death? Sister Xiao, call out to that handsome guy, that's where the shareholders are seated. A few leaders who were on better terms with Xiao Tong looked nervous and persuaded. But Xiao Tong just smiled lightly and shook her head. It's fine. The tone of her voice was very calm, not a trace of nervousness could be heard. In her opinion, if Yi Ning was not qualified to sit there, then these minority shareholders of Anshin Pharmaceuticals were even less qualified. Just as everyone was waiting to see Yi Ning's joke, Lu Jiandong stood up. Yi Dong, you're late to the party, ha ha ha. Hiss. In addition to Xiao Tong, a group of Anshin Pharmaceuticals top executives heard Lu Jiandong's words, and all of them turned their gazes towards Yi Ning. What did Dong Lu call this young man? Yi Dong? Could it be that this person was also one of the directors of Anshin Pharmaceuticals? However, Yi Ning seemed as if he had not heard Lu Jiandong's greeting, and instead cast his gaze towards the woman sitting at the very top. The one with her head buried in her hands, frowning as she kept flipping through the documents. She still had a head of burgundy-colored hair, with big waves that were very attractive. Although her head was lowered, she could still clearly see how exquisite her face was. With flaming red lips, she was as charming as she could be when she raised her hands and feet. Annie was not just a siren, but the most beautiful siren in the world. Yi Ning's move caused Lu Jiandong to frown slightly. His heart thumped even more. Could it be that Yi Ning had a crush on Annie? It wasn't surprising, as Annie's beauty was unsurpassed by anyone, and at most, it was similar to her. But Yi Ning had so much wealth at such a young age, would he be compelled by the beauty in front of him? Yi Dong, let me introduce you, this is the current chairman of our Anshin Pharmaceuticals, Chairman Enan. Lu Jiandong's face was a bit ugly, but he still forced a smile and introduced. The corners of Yi Ning's mouth rose slightly as he nodded. Coming to An's seat, he extended his hand and said, "And Dong, it's a pleasure to meet you." It was at this point that An finally lifted her head up, and the moment her eyes looked at Yi Ning, she could not help but have her pupils shrink. She naturally recognized that the Yi Ning in front of her was the man who had gone crazy with her that night. How was this possible? What? And Dong doesn't welcome me? Then I'll leave? Yi Ning raised his eyebrows towards An and smiled playfully. Everyone present, including Lu Jiandong, was somewhat incredulous. They couldn't help but sweat for Yi Ning. This man was so bold that he dared to tease Annie. However, thinking about it, Lu Jiandong was happy to see this scene in his heart. As long as Annie got angry and walked in opposition to Yi Ning. At that time, his coveted chairman position would be like a turtle in a jar. And couldn't help but feel a pang of amusement in her heart when she saw Yi Ning raise an eyebrow. If it had been any other man, perhaps she would have kicked him over. But this object was Yi Ning, and she actually felt that this man was a bit cute. In the midst of everyone's shock, Anne reached out her right hand to shake Yi Ning's hand, welcoming Yi Dong to come. As she said this, she also quietly tickled Yi Ning's palm with her fingertips, causing a stirring in Yi Ning's heart. This leprechaun, the killing power was too great. Yi Ning sat down on his seat, his palms all still lingering with the touch from the handshake just now. It had to be said that Annie's hands were really soft. The slippery skin coupled with the icy cool touch made him linger. 10 minutes later, the shareholders' meeting finally began. After Annie summarized the company's situation in the first half of the year, she said many follow-up strategies in a row. Then it was Lu Jiandong who led a group of company executives to speak. The meeting was nearing its end, just as Annie was about to summarize. Suddenly, a shareholder with a mustache clapped his hands. "Chairman An, you just said so much, but in my opinion, none of it is as beneficial as actual profits. We shareholders don't like to interfere in the company's business, but in the past year, our dividends haven't gone up much." What does this mean? It means that your plan and strategy are failures. Since we can't make any money by following you, why don't we rebuild the leadership team and put someone more talented in office? As soon as this shareholder finished speaking, someone else got up and agreed. Right. I support Lu Dong's suggestion. That's right, I don't care about the rest, at least the position of chairman should be filled by a more talented person. Finally, it's here. Yi Ning slowly opened his eyes, picking up the tea in front of him and taking a small sip. Turning his gaze towards the self-directed ones, his expression was sharp and incomparable. Chapter 73 Self-Direction. Snapped. An old shareholder with white hair and a deep gaze heavily slapped the desktop. Pointing at that Lu director, hated the iron, said, "Lu Li, the reason why you can reach today's position, all rely on Xiao and her father single-handedly promoted. And now what are you doing? This is called revenge." Cough cough cough. The old shareholders leaned on the chair, and constantly smoothed the depressed air in the chest. Everyone knew that Lu Jiandong would have a hard time with Annie today, but Lu Li coming to be the head of the group still made the old shareholders disappointed. These people, each and every one of them is just like a white-eyed wolf. The medical supplies produced by Anshin Pharmaceuticals do not have the slightest problem in terms of quality. But why the cooperation with many hospitals were forced to terminate? This is not an external factor, this is someone in their own family is tripping. And the tip of their knives, naturally, aimed at the current chairman of the board of directors, has the highest voice of Anshin Pharmaceuticals woman, Anne. Lu Li was scolded by the old shareholders, his face red with shame and indignation. But he still righteously and loudly said, "One size fits all. Now, what we are discussing is the issue of the company's effectiveness. It cannot be linked to personal feelings. I am not only for the future rice bowls of the shareholders, but also for the rice bowls of all employees of Anshin Pharmaceuticals, for the future of Anshin Pharmaceuticals." Lu Li held his head high and spoke righteously. It seems like he really is a person who can sacrifice himself for the benefit of others. But everyone understands that this is a hypocrite who sees money in the eye of the beholder. Okay. Director Lu, how can you arbitrarily make up the chairman? No one thought that the person who stopped Lu Li would be Lu Jiandong. Even Yi Ning's expression flashed with a hint of dismay. But after a little thought he reacted and took a deep look at Lu Jiandong. This person had a very deep city and had to be said to be a character. He wanted to sit in that position and was unwilling to have outsiders say that he had an evil heart. It was really a good show. Only Lu Jiandong stood up and said loudly, "Nowadays, our Anshin Pharmaceuticals is facing a lot of difficulties, but I believe that the chairperson is just young and slightly inexperienced. As long as everyone gives her more time, she will definitely be able to lead an XIN medicine to a new height." What appeared to be words of defense for Anne were in fact hints at her lack of management ability. And without moving, he drew a big pie for everyone present. In today's society, who doesn't know that drawing a big pie is bluffing? Some shareholders who didn't want to participate in the fight between Lu Jiandong and Annie and only wanted to share the dividends couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Nearly a year, the dividends they got from Anshin Pharmaceuticals compared to the previous year's data, the increase is not big. Really want to reach the old chairman in the past in the kind of degree, how many more years? As a result, many people have buried their heads and considered Lu Li's suggestion. How about trying a different chairman? What if it could really achieve unexpected results? Seeing a few neutral shareholders fall into contemplation, the stone hanging in Lu Jiandong's heart fell. Immediately to Lu Li secretly made a wink. Lu Li understood, face aggrieved, prayed, "Mr. Lu, not I Lu Li choreographed chairman, but my family really cannot uncover the pot, please Mr. Lu sympathize with these small shareholders." Right. Lu Li slapped his palm and pretended to have a sudden realization. "Mr. Lu, as the general manager of the company, you are very familiar with everything about the company, and itself is the second largest shareholder of the company, fully qualified and capable of serving as chairman of the board of directors." After saying that, also did not forget to emphasize two sentences, right. "Mr. Lu, please become the chairman of the board of directors, and bring Anshin Pharmaceuticals to great heights." Lu Li's words just fell. A group of shareholders who stood in line with Lu Jiandong have said, "Please Lu as chairman of the board." Right. I, Old Qian, am the first to be in favor of Mr. Lu taking the position of chairman. Facing the support of Lu Li and others, Lu Jiandong had a difficult look on his face. He was entangled for a long time before turning his gaze to Anne. "And Dong, what do you think?" And quietly watched Lu Jiandong acting, her heart lingering. Lu Jiandong wanted to replace her position. This was something that all the company's executives knew. How could she not know? Originally, the two of them had reached a delicate balance between their own equity holdings plus their respective supporting shareholders combined. But today, Lu Jiandong was under the guise of doing everything in the interests of the shareholders, making the few people who maintained a neutral attitude fall to his side. Truly worthy of being an old fox. Annie looked at Lu Jiandong and the group of shareholders who supported him with interest. Silently, she dumped a stack of documents onto the table. "Mr. Lu, before you listen to my opinion, please also take a look at these things first." In the face of Lu Jiandong and the others' persecution, Anne's expression was bland. Many people thought that Anne was being forceful, but Lu Jiandong wasn't. To say that the one who knows you best is often your enemy, this saying was really true. Lu Jiandong knew that Annie wasn't the type of person who was aimless. Since she was able to remain calm and collected, it meant that she really did have the means to deal with the current crisis. Just now, Annie's face was as if there was no breeze on the surface of a lake, quiet and terrifying. It had already given Lu Jiandong a bad premonition. Now that Annie threw out a thick stack of documents, it even made his heart thump and his eyelids beat wildly. Chapter 74 Annie Strikes Back. Mr. Lu, what are you waiting for? Quickly look. Annie urged. The tone was cold to the extreme, without a trace of emotion. It caused everyone present to have a jolt, suddenly feeling a cold chill rising from the soles of their feet. Not to mention Lu Jiandong, Anne's words were like a death wish. It made cold sweat appear on his forehead, which had always been indifferent to sadness and unhappiness. Swallowing his saliva, his claws that were grasping towards the documents were trembling. Finally, Lu Jiandong touched those papers. The things were not cold, but to Lu Jiandong, it was like sticking his hand into an icy cold deep pool of frost. He wanted to retract his hand, but in full view of everyone, there was no courage at all. Lu Jiandong took a deep breath, and with a cross in his heart, he took the document in his hands. Fixing his eyes on it, all of a sudden, it was as if a raging bolt of lightning had appeared at first glance in his mind, followed by a roaring thunder. This is impossible. Lu Jiandong trembled his hands, panicked and terrified. Because what was printed on the document was clearly the evidence that he had bribed the executives of major hospitals for nearly a year. And these hospitals that accepted his bribes, in addition to the Jiangchen Kanda Hospital controlled by Yi Ning. Without exception, all of them had signed release contracts with Anshin Pharmaceuticals. Just as everyone was puzzled by Lu Jiandong's behavior, Annie stood up. A pair of beautiful eyes, like ice piercing the bones, but also like the sun burning the soul. Impossible? Anne's eyes were bloodshot and furious. Lu Jiandong, General Manager Lu, in your place, what else is impossible? When you did what you did, why didn't you think it was possible? When you instigated that punk son of yours to mess with me, did you ever think it was possible? When you coaxed the shareholders to side with you and did whatever it took to achieve your goal, did you ever think that it was possible? After saying that, Anne snatched the things in Lu Jiandong's hand and threw them into the faces of the shareholders who supported Lu Jiandong. Open your eyes to see, this is your mouth, hardworking, conscientious, dedicated to the company, dedicated to everyone's general manager Lu made things. An angry body in front of the fullness cannot stop undulating, hand veins rippled. After saying her words, she was unsteady and staggered back. Yi Ning's eyes and hands were quick, fiercely rising, a hand wrapped around Annie's soft willow waist, helping her to slowly sit down. Seeing that her eyes were bloodshot, a beautiful melon face was pale, showing her fatigue. A flash of guilt flashed through Yi Ning's eyes. In order to collect this evidence, this woman must be extremely tired. If he had found Xiao Tong earlier to gain a deeper understanding of Annie, then she wouldn't be in such a difficult situation today. Yi Ning did not see that everyone present had already exploded in an uproar. There were two reasons for this. One, of course, was the stack of documents that Annie had taken out, on which every article and paragraph detailed Lu Jiandong's misdeeds. The second was that Yi Ning had actually straddled an Xin Pharmaceuticals iceberg beauty, Anne. What was even stranger was that Anne didn't even look like she was resisting at all. Even the movements of the two were very natural, as if they were lovers who had been in love for a long time. Only Xiao Tong, who was sitting in the distance, revealed a look of realization. It seemed that she hadn't guessed wrong, and that the chairman of the board and Yi Ning really did have an affair. Anne was a few years younger than her, and she treated Anne as her boss at work, but as a younger sister in life. Now that a man willing to take care of Annie had appeared, Xiao Tong was naturally happy for her. But then she was a little worried. Yi Ning had other women, and the woman called Su Weier was no less beautiful than Annie. Yi Ning was also, why did he have to be a scum when he was so handsome? Alas! Xiao Tong couldn't help but sigh and could only helplessly shake her head. There were some things that weren't hers to intervene in. This Lu Jiandong, you are really a wolf, cough cough cough. The old shareholder who had supported Annie from the very beginning had read the documents and pointed at Lu Jiandong with a dry finger. Mr. Lu, is this true? Lu Jiandong, how dare you cajole us? Lu Jiandong, I understand that you want the position of chairman, but you actually dare to do something so masculine. For a while, the voices in favor of Lu Jiandong changed into a crowded crusade. These shareholders are like wallflowers, they fall wherever the wind blows. Especially when it was something that concerned their wallets. Facing the accusations of the crowd, Lu Jiandong crumpled in his chair. The originally elegant man became very helpless. Finally, as if he remembered something again, his eyes looked towards Yi Ning. Right. There was also Yi Ning. He was the third largest shareholder of Anshin Pharmaceuticals. Yi Ning was a standard businessman, and given enough benefits, there were ways to pull him in. As long as Yi Ning supported him, there was still hope for him to turn the tide. Mr. Yi, as the company's third largest shareholder, what is your opinion? Lu Jiandong kept giving Yi Ning winks, hinting at something. Yi Ning stared at Lu Jiandong for a while with a stunned expression. This wasn't a fool, I'm afraid. Even a big boss like Lu Jiandong would be sick and desperate when faced with a difficult situation? He suddenly felt that this person was quite pitiful, but of course, Yi Ning would not sympathize. Everything else can be put aside, but what's up with you instigating your son to provoke my wife? I'm not the cuckold king. Chapter 75 What a demonic spirit. Oh, Lu Jiandong, I said, I won't intervene in the matter between you. Yi Ning looked as if it was none of his business, hanging high. Of course, this is adaptive non-interference. If the person in trouble right now was Annie, Yi Ning would have already stepped forward. Lu Jiandong thought that Yi Ning didn't understand what he meant, and unwillingly said bluntly, Mr. Yi, as long as I become the chairman of the board of directors, I will give you 1/3 of my dividends in the future. 1/3? Oh, Lu Jiandong, you are so generous. Hearing Yi Ning's answer, Lu Jiandong was delighted in his heart. Just about to thank him, he raised his head just in time to meet Yi Ning's teasing eyes. Lu Jiandong, why don't you give me all the shares you hold in your hands? Maybe I can still consider it, ha. By this point, how could Lu Jiandong not realize that Yi Ning was playing with himself? He looked around in despair and realized that not a single person dared to utter a word in support of him. Even those subordinates who usually followed like dogs to curry favor with him consciously looked their faces to the side. Anger in his heart, a blood chi surged up to his heart and went straight to the top of his head. His head was dizzy, his eyes blanched, and he fell backwards. Mr. Lu Jiandong. In the end, it was In who presided over the situation and arranged for manpower to send Lu Jiandong to the hospital. Then later, it was those few shareholders who had followed Lu Jiandong who came to Annie and bowed their heads in apology. Yi Ning always stood on the sidelines, looking at them indifferently without speaking. He believed that with Annie's means, it was more than enough to deal with these wallflowers. He only needed to stay here with her, and that was enough. It wasn't until everyone had left, and only Annie and Yi Ning were left in the large conference room, that Yi Ning finally walked over to Annie. Annie looked towards Yi Ning, obviously a little tired, but still forced a smile and asked, how was it? Little brother, sister is awesome, right? Yi Ning nodded and didn't say anything, only opening his arms and holding the wonderful human child in his arms. And was no shorter than Su Weier, but she wasn't short either, wearing high heels, she was just a drop lower than Yi Ning. Yi Ning tenderly wrapped his arms around An's slender waist, burying his head into her large waves. The fragrance of roses was overflowing, making Yi Ning feel as if he was in the middle of it, incomparably cozy. Annie didn't expect Yi Ning to be so bold. The entire person stiffened slightly, her white arms placed stiffly in front of her body, and for a moment, she was somewhat at a loss for words. After struggling slightly, she gave up. For Yi Ning, Annie's feelings were complicated. Perhaps it was still a nanometer short of reaching the level of liking, but there was definitely a good feeling. Otherwise, she wouldn't have lingered with Yi Ning that night. After that night, it was impossible to say that she regretted it. But there was definitely melancholy in there. Originally, she thought that she and this man would never meet again. Today, Yi Ning even appeared in front of her alive. Even as the third largest shareholder of Anshin Pharmaceuticals. This was also too amazing. Even more unbelievable was the fact that this little man was now hugging her tightly, as if he wanted to melt her into his body that way. Okay, this is a conference room, there is surveillance. Annie's small white hand patted Yi Ning's back. Through the thin short sleeves, she touched the muscles on Yi Ning's body. The first image in Annie's mind was the scene of touching Yi Ning's muscles that night. For a moment, it was surprising to feel her cheeks getting a little hot. What kind of person are you? Do bad things lift up your pants and leave? Do you know that you have to be responsible? Yi Ning slowly let go of the beautiful person in his arms, gently touching Annie's cheeks. His eyes were actually a little red. Goblin, you have to compensate me for the mental damage. Goblin? And heard someone call herself this for the first time. In the past, when her father was still alive, outsiders called her Miss N. Those gentlemen of the same generation also called her Big Sister. Yi Ning's phrase, vixen, was quite a novelty to N. Moreover, she surprisingly did not feel the slightest bit bad about this name, and was even a little pleased. Little brother, how do you want me to compensate? Annie asked with a shallow smile. The small tongue licked her red lips, demonic incomparable. If outsiders see this expression of Annie, I wonder if they will feel that they are dreaming and still not awake. Because, the chairman of an XIN medicine, was never a cold woman. All the time is not a face, acting in a thunderous style. Even the usual walking, high heels or stepping on the doo-doo, step like flying. How could such an ice face show a smile to others? Not to mention a man. They didn't know that Annie had always had two sides. When she was serious, she could shock the entire company with her aura alone. When she was hot, she could be like the most vibrant red rose, bewitching and beautiful. Seeing Annie's expression and movements, and hearing her seductive magical voice. Even though Yining had been in the battlefield for a long time, he couldn't help but feel a tremor in his heart. The temperature in his body rose, and even the air was a bit fiery. Hissing. Yining took a deep breath, stared at that perfect face, and couldn't help but move up. No way. Anne's two fingers rested against Yining's lips, emitting a gust of fragrance. Yining helpless, not to compensate me? Anne smiled and shook her head, under surveillance, I don't want it. When Yining heard this, his eyes lit up, that? Humph, and turned around, bringing up a fragrant breeze. As she was about to walk out of the door of the conference room, a petite voice came out, want compensation, follow me upstairs. Chapter 76 Sweet Bitter Coffee. Yining followed behind Annie, and along the way, he ran into quite a number of Anshin Pharmaceuticals employees. Most of them had not attended today's shareholders' meeting. Therefore, when these people saw a strange young man following behind Annie, they could not help but speculate about Yining's identity. Quick look. That's the chairman of the board, isn't it? Who's the man behind her? So handsome. Standing together with the chairman of the board, it could be said that he was a man and a woman. What if he's the chairman's brother? Brother my ass. Can't you see the chairman's face is so shy? Even if it's his brother, it's still his brother who needs him. Although I don't see the chairman's shyness, but your analysis seems to have some sense. Following. And to her office, Secretary Shayan brewed a cup of coffee for each of them, then closed the door wisely and left. Yining picked up the coffee and took a sip. A thick bitterness flowed through his mouth, filling his taste buds. Yining frowned, deflated his mouth, and hurriedly put it down. He was afraid that if he took another sip like that, the people of the entire village would have to wait to be served. You don't like drinking this? Seeing Yining's reaction, Anne was a bit amused, holding a small spoon in her hand and stirring continuously in her own cup of coffee. Can't appreciate it, coffee Thai pants spicy. Yining shook his head in disgust. Strangely enough, Yining himself didn't hate bitter flavors. For example, he was quite fond of the dish scrambled eggs with bitter melon. But a drink like coffee, from the first time he came into contact with it, he really didn't like it. Anne's small eyes rolled, as if she had thought of something amusing. The body leaned slightly towards Yining, and her slender white arm rested on Yining's shoulder. Attaching her small mouth to Yining's ear, she whispered, "Little brother, I have sweet coffee here, do you want to drink it?" After saying that, he also deliberately revealed the tip of his tongue and gently scratched Yining's earlobe. Warm and soft, causing Yining to be jolted, turning his head and looking at Annie with an unbelievable face. This woman, too, was too good at it. If he hadn't seen the splash of bright red on the sheet with his own eyes, Yining would have wondered if Annie was an old driver. This driving skill was first-rate, and she also perfectly pinpointed men's psychology. Of course, this was also the point that attracted Yining the most to her. Seeing that Yining froze and didn't say anything, Annie stretched out her index finger to tap Yining's cheek. Her tongue licked her red lips, chirping and whistling for a period of time while quickly tossing her head, her red hair fluttering, quickly say, "Do you want a drink or not?" This move was simply more demonic than a leprechaun. Yining couldn't wait to immediately transform into the Monkey King to subdue the demon. "Want?" he said without hesitation. Annie smiled and nodded, "That's good." Saying so, he picked up the gradually warming coffee, his lips and teeth gently opened, and took a small sip. A faint bitter taste remained in her mouth. Then, she quickly moved her face towards Yining, pointed at his mouth, hesitated a little, and then kissed him. Well. A faint bitter flavor filled the air, but then dispersed extremely quickly, followed by a rich sweetness. Is this the sweet coffee Annie talked about? It was really enjoyable. Yining couldn't help but hug Anne's slender waist, and as if he wasn't satisfied with the status quo, he slowly climbed upwards with both hands. Snap. And stopped Yining's movements in time and pulled away. Seemingly smiling and staring at Yining, "Little brother, you are not honest. Yining, who had been torn apart by the cough, was a little embarrassed. But there was nothing he could do about it. All this situation, as the first deep love of Jiang Cheng, can he not have some action? Well, the compensation has also been given to you, so let me rest for a while. And crossed her fingertips and stretched forward to stretch her legs. Bending down, she took off her high heels, revealing a pair of jade feet wrapped in stockings. Finding a comfortable position, she rested on Yining's thigh and closed her eyes. During this time, the corners of Anne's mouth always carried a faint smile. It was very different from the usual cold and icy her. Perhaps only Yining could appreciate another side of her. She was like a locked diary, and only the person with the key could unlock the lock in her heart. Yining wrapped one hand around Annie's thin waist and dragged her delicate face with the other. He felt that this moment was surprisingly so beautiful. Ever since encountering Annie, Yining's world had changed drastically. It could be said that the source of everything went back to that night. Fortunately, today he saw this woman again and rightfully held her in his arms. Thinking about it, Yining also felt his eyelids heavy, and unknowingly fell asleep. When he woke up, the person in his arms had already disappeared. Vaguely, he heard someone whispering outside the office door. In the next second, the door to the room slowly pushed open, and Anne, wearing a pair of slippers, lightly walked in. Yining reacted quickly and closed his eyes at the first time. Rustle, rustle. Although Annie was walking very lightly, listening carefully, a little sound could still be recognized. Yining clearly felt that Annie had already walked in front of him. After a long time, the rose scent intensified and a warm breath approached. A soft touch nudged at his face. Yining's eyes opened, and while Annie wasn't paying attention, he hugged her. Ah! Well! And screamed, and was immediately blocked from her red lips. Chapter 77 Lu Tianxiang provoked. Knock, knock, knock. Inside the office, the two of them kissed deeply, and while they were in a state of love and fascination, the knock on the door pulled the two of them back to reality. And Dong, Director Lu wants to see you. Outside the door, came the voice of Secretary Xiao Yan. Sydney. And was as fast as lightning and quickly pushed Yining away. Standing up, she perfunctorily tidied up her somewhat wrinkled skirt and messy hair. In a serious manner, she came to the office chair and sat down. Anne's actions made Yining laugh silently. Especially after seeing Annie blankly glance at him, her expression became incomparably serious, similar to that of the iceberg queen on top of the snowy mountains. This face-changing speed is simply comparable to the Sichuan opera face-changing, intangible cultural heritage without you I don't see. Aha! Annie cleared her throat, please come in. Yining was wondering who this Superintendent Lu was. The door opened, and it turned out to be Lu Tianxiang, the stupid son of the landlord's family. Seeing Yining sitting on the sofa, Lu Tianxiang looked stunned for a moment. Following Yining, he suddenly realized the pair of red high heels placed under the coffee table. As if he thought of something, his face became a bit ugly. In an XIN, who didn't know that he, Lu Tianxiang, was pursuing Annie? Even if his father, Lu Jiandong, encouraged him because he coveted the shares in Annie's hands. But only he himself knew that he truly wanted to obtain Annie's favor. However, now he saw Anne's high heels at Yining's feet. Not to mention the fact that the two of them had been in the office together for so long. What were the two of them, Yining and Annie, doing? What else could they be doing? Playing the exciting game of happy happiness? Thinking of this, a ball of anger flared up in Lu Tianxiang's heart. Taking a deep breath, he forcibly suppressed his anger. Annie, why is he here? Lu Tianxiang gritted his teeth, his tone contained the meaning of questioning. Director Lu, you should address me as chairman. Anne's gaze crossed and her tone was icy. Also, Yidong is the third largest shareholder of Anshin Pharmaceuticals. Is it strange for him to appear in my office? Yining was a bit speechless when he heard the first words spoken by Lu Tianxiang when he opened his mouth. It was really right to say that he was the landlord's stupid son. What kind of subordinate enters the door and indiscriminately questions his superior? Even if it was Lu Jiandong, he could only question and he wouldn't be like a dead mother, questioning with a cold face. Lu Tianxiang was dumbfounded by Annie's two words of dislike. Seeing that and had no intention of asking Yining to leave, she also stopped saying anything more. He could only change the topic and said, and Dawn, my cousin's daughter-in-law just found me and said she was fired, is that true? That's all there is to it. Hearing Lu Tianxiang's words, and felt bored, while staring at the computer screen, while answering. Yes, I personally dismissed, the financial side has already begun to settle her wages. Hearing the words of a not cold, Lu Tianxiang anxious, why Andong, that is my relative. What's wrong with your relative? Your relative can do nothing all day long, know nothing and still become a small supervisor? If the company is like you, nepotism, then it is not a mess? How would you make the people below you feel? How will you make those who really create benefits for the company think? Annie scolded. But Lu Tianxiang still wanted to say something. But saw Annie impatiently waving her hand. Director Lu, you don't need to say anything, this matter is not negotiable. If you don't have anything else, go out first. Seeing that Annie was so forceful and did not give him the slightest bit of face, Lu Tianxiang could only sigh helplessly. He knew that Annie was taking their Lu family to task. Today it was just dismissing a small supervisor, tomorrow it might be someone else. But now he can be said to be helpless. His biggest dependence is lying in the hospital, can only watch his father cultivated power by Annie's step-by-step disintegration. Before leaving, Lu Tianxiang glanced at Yi Ning. Seeing Yi Ning's gaze focused on Annie, he didn't even bother to look at him. Treating him as air, the flame of humiliation rose in his heart. With a flash of light in his mind, Lu Tianxiang put on a smile and said to Yi Ning, Yi Dong, it was me who was unintelligent before and offended my sister-in-law, I'm really sorry. After saying this, he also bowed deeply before turning to leave, with a very sincere attitude. As soon as these words came out, Yi Ning secretly said bad. When the office closed again, he and Annie were the only ones left in the room. Stealing a glance towards him, he saw her scrutinizing himself meaningfully. Why did that pair of beautiful, uncharacteristically seductive eyes looking over give him a feeling of being in an icy, creepy place? Oh, wife, it's a beautiful day today, Yi Ning laughed dryly. Wife? Annie repeated, meaningfully. There's still something missing, isn't there? Shouldn't it be right to add the word little in front of the title? Add a little word? Little wife. No, no, no. Yi Ning frantically shook his head, how could this be possible? He was dead set on denying it, wasn't he? Anne's beautiful eyes condensed, stretching out her long and slender index finger than a word one, I only ask you one question, that surnamed Lu's mouth said sister-in-law who is it? Ere Yi Ning immediately dared not speak. Of course he knew it was Su Wire, but was this something that could be said? Can't say anything. Seeing Yi Ning's silence, his face was difficult. Annie pointed to the door and said, the door is over there, you, go out. Chapter 78 You said you wanted to teach me a lesson. Yi Ning got up, walked around the desk, and came behind Annie. Opened his hands and wanted to hug her. But Annie turned back, her white lotus root arms against Yi Ning's chest. Urged, I have to work now, so get going. It looked like Annie was really angry. It was also right, a hallowed and stunningly beautiful chairman of the board. How could she possibly share a man with another woman? Yi Ning was somewhat helpless and could only hang his head and walk out of the office. Just as Yi Ning closed the door, Anne's voice suddenly came from within the office. Right the day after tomorrow bring me your Koenigsegg 1-1 to play with well, that's it. Annie did not look up, her eyes staring straight at the computer, her fingertips rapidly tapping the keyboard. Just for some reason, a pair of demonic eyes carried a smile from time to time. It was like they were smiling, but also like they weren't. Yi Ning's heart was swept away in gloom, so it was in arrogance. Face ruffled smile, deliberately dragged the end of the voice, no, demon wife. And hand a beat, forcibly restrained the indisputable desire to raise the corners of the mouth. Closing her eyes and taking a deep breath, she let out a cold snort through her nose and once again plunged into her work. Taking the elevator downstairs, Yi Ning hummed a song and walked towards the front door with a smile. Lu Tianxiang had waited at the entrance for a long time, just wanting to see Yi Ning's dejected expression. But it was not to be, Yi Ning actually smiled with unknown joy. Humming a song on his lips, his footsteps were so brisk that he was close to dancing. Lu Tianxiang stared at Yi Ning with his mouth open in surprise, wanting to see Yi Ning's disguise from his face. Impossible. How could a proud daughter of heaven like Annie be indifferent when she heard that Yi Ning already had a girlfriend? He was being hard-headed. Right, that must be it. Thinking about it, Yi Ning had already walked to the door. As he brushed past his shoulders, Lu Tianxiang's eyes sneered, and he whispered in words that only the two could hear, Yi Ning, you're not happy about being kicked out by Annie, are you? What? You want to teach me a lesson? Yi Ning's face changed dramatically, deliberately raising his voice. Lu Tianxiang was puzzled, did he say that he wanted to teach Yi Ning this sentence? Before he could react, he felt a violent impact on his stomach. Lu Tianxiang was unsteady and fell back 2 steps, being kicked to the ground by Yi Ning. Ah! Lu Tianxiang suffered pain, covering his stomach and letting out a wail. Yi Ning grimaced and raised his hand. Snap! Snap! 2 slaps were thrown on Lu Tianxiang's face. I let you off last time, but you still want to teach me a lesson. Do you think you're a bitch? Lu Tianxiang was slapped in the eyes by Yi Ning. His cheeks swelled high, and the fiery pain hit him, drilling straight into his heart. The commotion was so loud that it naturally attracted the attention of everyone present. Superintendent Lu was beaten, go help. Are you nuts? The person who beat him up is one of our bosses. I heard that he also has a relationship with Indong, and many people saw him hugging Indong today. So bullish? What should we do? Just pretend we didn't see it and do what we have to do. That's right, I couldn't stand the Lu family for a long time, and now that I've seen Lu Tianxiang being beaten up, to be honest, it's pretty cool. Even the security guards on duty in the monitoring room, after seeing the beaten person as Lu Tianxiang, they silently turned the camera to other places. Lu Tianxiang originally thought that with his prestige in the company, someone would definitely come to his aid. As a result, until the time Yi Ning shook off his somewhat tired hands and let go of him, no one had yet come over to talk him out of the fight. Even on the first floor of the hall, apart from the 2 of them, there wasn't even a single silhouette. Lu Tianxiang, don't think about lecturing others when there's nothing else to do, sometimes it's a slap in the face. Yi Ning drew out a tissue and wiped his hands blandly. It is indeed a slap in the face, but it is physical. Casually throwing the paper towel into the trash can, his index finger turned the key ring of the Mercedes-Benz Big G. Eyes indifferently swept a glance at Lu Tianxiang and raised his head. Only after seeing Yi Ning's fading back did Lu Tianxiang finally gasp. This madman had finally left. Bitterness appeared on Lu Tianxiang's face. Was Yi Ning really his nemesis? Ever since he had encountered Yi Ning, not a single thing had gone smoothly. Not to mention becoming the #1 son of Anshin Pharmaceuticals. Even now, his dad's position as general manager was in jeopardy. Just now, he was beaten up by Yi Ning in front of everyone. In the future, would he still be able to hold his head up in Anshin Pharmaceuticals? Shortly after, Xiaoyan walked into An's office. Chairman, this is the information you wanted. Xiaoyan placed a folder on Annie's desk and took the initiative to add a cup of coffee for Annie. By the way, Chairman, just now Director Lu was beaten downstairs. Annie raised her head and revealed a surprised look. Thinking carefully, she came up with an answer in her mind. Did Yi Ning do it? Well, I heard that it was Director Lu who threatened and tried to teach Yidong a lesson, and Yidong just went straight for it. Xiaoyan explained. Is Yi Ning all right? And hurriedly asked after him, with some urgency in her words. Yidong is fine, but it is Director Lu who was kicked by Yidong and slapped a few times. Yi Ning is fine on the line. Annie breathed a sigh of relief, nodded her head to indicate that she knew, and flipped open the folder to view it. Seeing Annie's reaction, Xiaoyan secretly said, the chairman of the board really treats Yidong differently from other men. Director Lu, rest in peace. I hope that when you get to heaven, you can find someone who loves you. Xiaoyan closed the door and leaned her back on the gate, praying silently for Lu Tianxiang. Chapter 79 The basic professional conduct of a standardized man. As for Yi Ning, he was already on his way to Su Weier's house. It was hard to be teased by that demonic spirit today. The current Yi Ning was in dire need of lowering his fire. As a scumbag, you absolutely could not let the woman you were about to meet smell another woman's flavor on you. This was basic professional conduct, and Yi Ning naturally knew how to start. Coming to a flower store, Yi Ning paid for a bunch of roses. The scent was exactly the same as the one on Annie's body. With roses as a gift, it was impossible for Annie to suspect anything at all. It must be impossible to turn over the car. Ding! Host spends 999 yuan for Su Weier, gets a blitz, rewarded with a garden villa in Magic City, Rose City. Another villa? Still in Magic City. Not bad, a few $100s for a villa in Magic City. You've made a fortune, right? The chosen fortunate star, Vivian Su, is at it again. Yi Ning held the roses and turned to leave. The florist's wife looked at him for a long time, her eyes not hiding her admiration. This little brother is too handsome. It's just that his roses aren't for me, what a pity. Sister, don't look at it, people's shadows are gone. Beside the boss's wife, a 14 or 15-year-old boy spat. Besides, don't you like that brother who can draw? Why, do you have your eyes on another handsome guy? Xiaoyu, don't talk nonsense, I call this appreciation. What do you know as a little kid? Yining, are you back? Hearing the sound of the door lock opening, Su Weier walked out of the small study. While speaking, she removed her hairpin. Dressed in Chinese clothing, she had just gotten off the air. Dang dang. Yining put the rose into Su Weier's arms and asked with a smile, sent to you, do you like it? Thank you, I like it a lot. Su Weier moved one of the petals and took a shallow sniff with her little agaric nose. The fragrance made her relaxed, and a sweet smile appeared on her face. Violet puts the rose next to the starry sky and continues to look in the mirror to remove the tiara. A few minutes later, Su Weier removed the last hairpin. Dark, thick hair poured out like a waterfall, soft and natural. So beautiful. Yining stared at the stunningly beautiful girl in front of him, his breathing slightly shortened. Just as Su Weier was about to continue taking off her Chinese dress, Yining took a large step forward. With one hand, he grabbed Su Weier's delicate little hand. Approaching her small ear, he quietly said, don't take it off first, just wear this to try it on, okay? Su Weier didn't know what Yining meant at first. But when she met Yining's fiery eyes, her pretty face instantly turned as red as the sun. This big bad guy. As soon as he got home, he was thinking about this. But she didn't resist, only slightly burying her little head. Staring at her small feet, her small hands tugged at the edge of her skirt, not speaking. Seeing this girl's reaction, Yining knew that she had agreed. In Su Weier's exclamation of surprise, he picked her up in a princess carry. Walking into the bedroom, he hooked his heel. Creak thud. The door to the room closed tightly. Shortly afterward, a burst of delicate, stirring cries came from within the room. By the time the bedroom door opened again, it was already more than an hour later. Su Weier had long since changed into her at-home pajamas, her hair was still a little wet, and her body was scented with shower gel. But her walking posture looked so unnatural. Su Weier, whose legs and feet were sore and weak, came to the living room and laid down on the sofa somewhat feebly. The sound of Yining's song came from the kitchen, and just as soon as she heard it, she clenched her shell teeth in anger. Originally, she had already promised him to wear a hanbok. As a result, after finishing, this man took advantage of the fact that she was on her way to take a shower and then broke into the bathroom. Now she was exhausted. He was good, refreshed and spirited like a cow. Yining, who had dispersed the evil fire, made 2 bowls of tomato and egg noodles and brought them to the table. Xiao Weier, eat. Su Weier's stomach had long been hungry and rumbling, and seeing the 2 bowls of fragrant, shiny noodles on the table, her fingers were tingling. The two of them leaned shoulder to shoulder and ate happily. Right, Yining, I have something to tell you. Su Weier seemed to remember something. Grabbing the cell phone that was sitting on the table, she tapped on a text message and held it out to Yining. The Flying Fish platform invited me to attend an event at the Magic City headquarters. Do you think I should say yes? Since Su Weier was asking, it meant that she wanted to go. Besides, it was a good thing, so Yining naturally supported it. Go, you're also a big anchor on the platform now, there's no harm in participating more. Yining snapped the chopsticks between his fingers and replied. When is it? Yining asked. The event is in the middle of next month. Yining nodded, okay, I will accompany you then. Won't it delay your own work? Su Weier was a bit worried. It doesn't matter, you are more important than work. Yining touched Su Weier's green silk, his eyes doting. Yining, you're so nice, Mua. Su Weier was touched, and gave Yining a kiss on the cheek. At night, Yining wrapped his arms around Su Weier's petite body and lay on the bed, his heart incomparably satisfied. Su Weier was resting on Yining's chest, and the two of them watched the cartoons playing on their cell phones together. Of course, Yining's other hand wasn't idle, as if he was a qualified mountain climber, climbing the peaks. Just as both of them were breathing a bit heavily, the screen suddenly turned around. A video call came in. Yining's pupils shrunk slightly, and his heart thumped. Because what was displayed on the screen was clearly Annie's avatar. Chapter 80 Chapter 80 Chapter 80 each has 1,000 autumnalities. Anne's sudden attack scared Yining's left hand, and exerted a few points of force. Su Weier's sandalwood mouth gave a call, removing the devil's claws from her body, sitting up, and turning back to give Yining a blank look. Of course she knew why Yining was suddenly nervous. This woman whose docket name was Goblin was one of Yining's redheads, right? Even Sue Ware, who was at the top of her face value, had to admit that the goblin in the avatar box was indeed very pretty. A beautiful red dress with big burgundy waves and a tall figure with just the right proportion. On the delicate face, the most noticeable thing was the full and elastic red lips. Like the sun, it is burning hot and withholding people's souls. It was so beautiful. Of course, she also had the same level of looks, just a very different style. Moreover, she saw that although Annie's capital was not small, it was still much inferior to her own. With this major discovery, the corners of Sue Ware's mouth couldn't help but rise slightly, and her face gained a bit more complacency. But then she thought about the fact that Yi Ning had other women besides her. Even though Yi Ning had revealed it at the very beginning, it was inevitable that there was still some frustration when truly confronted with this matter. Alas! Yi Ning was not only a big bad guy. It was even more of a womanizer. Aren't you going to answer it? Seeing Yi Ning's delay, Sue Ware asked sourly. Yi Ning heard this girl's jealousy from her words. Helplessly rubbing Sue Ware's little head, he picked up his cell phone and walked towards the balcony. Little brother, didn't expect me to call you at this time, did you? Not answering for so long, are you busy? The video connected and Anne's siren-like pretty face appeared on the screen. She was wearing a thin nightgown, combing a pill head. Her skin was glossy and shiny, like a lotus flower. There was a smile on her face, and her tone was slightly flirtatious. Picking up the video so slowly, coupled with the pajamas on Yi Ning's body, and sighed lightly in her heart. In the bedroom, there must still be a beautiful woman lying, right? Goblin, you are beautiful. Yi Ning sighed heartily in admiration. Of course, there was also a bit of an intention to pull away from the topic. In the face of such a situation, even he was unable to maintain his composure at all times. Hearing Yi Ning's praise, Annie was naturally joyful. This was perhaps a woman's desire to please herself. However, she still snorted coldly, her eyes carrying disdain. Humph! Only someone with a ghost in their heart would answer a question. Yi Ning smiled somewhat embarrassedly. I don't have a ghost in my heart, but there is a goblin. Saying that, Yi Ning stared straight at the screen and pretended to swallow saliva. Annie spat. This trick might be useful to a little girl like Sue Ware, but it didn't have the slightest effect on Anne, a big lady who had seen the world. You should save those words for coaxing that sister in the room. By the way, it's a sister, right? Annie asked after her. Yi Ning nodded his head in acknowledgement. Sue Ware was 2 years younger than Yi Ning, and there was also a 2-year gap between Yi Ning and Annie. Alas! It was clearly me who came first. And said with a sigh of regret. Yi Ning. It turned out that Annie was talking about the order of coming first. He was wrong. Of course, no matter how you count it, Annie is the older sister. Then, Anne asked with glowing eyes, how do you look? Do I look good? Yi Ning's heart rang an alarm bell when he said this. This is a life-saving question. He looked back towards the bedroom. Sure enough. Between the cracks of the glass door, half a small ear stretched to the outside. This girl is eavesdropping. Ahem. Yi Ning coughed twice, and said with a serious face, you and she both look good, each has its own flavor. After hearing this, Annie giggled a few times and nodded. Since it could be compared to her, it definitely wouldn't be bad. This flamboyant little brother really doesn't have low requirements for women. Give her the cell phone, let me neat little sister, Annie said with some excitement. Yi Ning's eyes showed a hint of strangeness. Counting, shouldn't Sue Ware be her love rival? Why did she look quite excited after hearing Sue Ware's beautiful reply? Slowly, his goblin wouldn't be the type to eat both men and women, right? Hiss. Yi Ning felt that it was necessary for him to guard against this. Just as he was about to find a reason to refuse, he heard the sound of the glass door opening. Sue Ware came to Yi Ning's front, looking a little nervous. When still mustered up the courage, she grabbed his hand that was holding on the railing and shook it. Sticky said, Yi Ning, I also want to talk to my sister, okay? Sue Ware's pleading eyes shattered Yi Ning's defenses in an instant. Yi Ning, well, here you go. Handing the cell phone over to Sue Ware, Yi Ning stood still. Perking up his ears, he wanted to hear what the two would be chatting about. It wasn't that he was gossiping, but just in case he was a little careless, and the harem caught fire, the person who burned would be himself. Just at this time, but heard Annie said, little sister, you first find a quiet place, we two talk about things between women. Su Weier thought about it and thought it made sense, smiled and nodded, holding her cell phone and walking towards the room where she usually broadcasts live. After closing the door, she also unlocked the door to her room to prevent certain bad guys from eavesdropping. As for her behavior of eavesdropping on Yining just now, it had long been ignored by her. Chapter 81 Under the Pajamas. Su Weier's series of actions flowed smoothly, and Yining looked at the empty bedroom with a confused face. Was this the tacit understanding between women? Yining was alone in the empty room for a long time before he finally heard Su Weier open the door, accompanied by the two women's cheeky laughter. Su Weier walked into the dormitory room with her cell phone in hand, her face dyed red, her small hand covering her mouth as she laughed. The boulder hanging in Yining's heart finally fell to the ground. It could be seen that the two women were chatting quite happily and getting along very well. Regardless of what would happen when they actually met in the future, at least they had made a good start now. It's getting late, sister, so I won't bother you two to spend the night together. Su Weier's thin skin, where could she stand this kind of flirting from Annie? Slightly shyly smiled, looking at the screen at the same time, but also from time to time glanced at Yining lying on the bed. Bright big eyes, pupils cut water. By the way, just asked you the question, you can answer me well. Oh. Annie continued to hint. Su Weier's face became even redder, but still nodded her head to indicate that she knew. Just as Yining was speculating, what strange questions did Annie ask Su Weier? And reminded loudly into her cell phone, little brother, this sister I like very much, you don't want to bully her. After saying that, accompanied by a few seductive petite laughs, Annie decisively hung up the phone. Yining was quite curious about the issue that Annie had just mentioned. Especially after seeing Su Weier's cute appearance that was so shy at the moment that she scratched her naughty little toes tightly. The questions in his heart were even more numerous. Little Weier, what did Annie say to you just now? Yining held Su Weier's delicate catkin. With a little force, Su Weier fell into his arms. Su Weier met Yining's star-like eyes, and then seemed to remember something, and became even more embarrassed. The heart of a deer in the head, the expression contained shyness, to Yining spit out a small tongue, do not tell you, slightly. Don't tell me? I'll see if you dare not tell me. The corner of Yining's mouth curved, smiling evilly. Looking for permission for Weier's most ticklish waist nest, a fierce scratch. Ha ha ha. Yining, don't, my tears are coming out. Su Weier is most afraid of this, constantly begging for mercy. I don't want to say it. I don't. Su Weier pouted her little mouth. Good, then don't blame me. Eh? When did you change this? Yining was surprised. Under Su Weier's loose pajamas, there was actually a JK. Facing Yining's doubts, Su Weier did not answer. She just looked her face to the side, through the green silk, revealing her white and red neck. With such a beautiful view, even Yining was visibly frozen. His breathing stagnated, and only his hands slowly wrapped around Su Weier's thin waist. Su Weier obediently fell into his arms, hooking her middle finger and pulling the hair on her face behind her ear, revealing a pure and absolutely beautiful side face. Her cherry-like mouth was so colorful that Yining fell deeply into it. Casually turning off the lights, the surroundings fell into darkness. With the breeze, the mimosa on the balcony silently closed its leaves. 2 days later, Yining returned to the villa and drove a half-small Target of Koenigsegg 11 to Anshin Pharmaceuticals. On the way, the traffic was heavy, and the sound of a beeping horn was loud and clear. Among the many private cars, a black supercar was incomparably conspicuous. Whether it was the roar of the engine, or the eye-brightening handsome appearance, it made countless pedestrians unable to stop and watch. This is too handsome. Honey, if you buy me that car, I'll promise to marry you. On the road, a demurely dressed woman trailed off, whining to the slightly chubby man beside her. The chubby man looked in the direction the woman pointed. Where the target was, it was a Koenigsegg supercar. Or Koenigsegg 11. Honey, how good. The sultry woman shook the hand of the chubby man, and kept pampering. The chubby man did not say anything, just silently opened the woman's handbag, from which took out the mirror to hand her. Demure woman puzzled at the time, fat man's harsh voice came. Use the mirror to look at yourself, and then look at me. Don't say Koenigsegg 11, it's just an ordinary supercar, do you think you're worthy of it? Or do you think I can afford it? After saying that, ignoring the expression of shame and indignation of the demonic woman, he shook off her hand and walked towards the bus stop alone. Yining naturally knew that driving this car would attract countless gazes. Even when he came to the Anshin Pharmaceuticals parking lot, there were still a very large number of drivers who made way for him for fear of scratching. Director Xiao, what a coincidence, it's the two of us again, and it's still the same location. Yining stepped out of the car door, saw Xiao Tong park her car, and greeted her with a smile. Yi first, oh no, Yi Dong. Xiao Tong opened her mouth wide and looked at Yining in surprise. This is your car? Yeah, it's not bad, right? Yining patted the roof of the car and smiled. Xiao Tong deflated, this is not just okay, this is simply going to the sky, okay? Even if she didn't know anything about cars, she knew that this car wasn't something that her little Minnie could touch. Even if she did not know anything about cars, she knew that this car was not something that her little Minnie could touch. She even had a vague feeling that Yining's car was a lot more expensive than even the chairman's Ferrari. Otherwise, why didn't those few employees looking for a parking space park their cars over? There were clearly a few empty spaces nearby. Only she herself, like a clueless fool, parked next to Yining. Chapter 82 I don't want to go anywhere right now. Hello Yi Dong. Yi Dong, good morning. Arriving downstairs at Anne's office, many of Anshin Pharmaceuticals employees came forward to greet her. Especially some young girls in their 20s were even more active, rushing up. Yining smiled and greeted them one by one. It caused countless single men to become jealous. However, thinking of Yining's status, they could only cower in the corner, daring to speak out in anger. What could be done about it? Not only was the other Yining handsome and dashing, but he was also very rich. Rumor had it that Yining was a successor being groomed by one of the families in the magic capital or the imperial capital. One of the reasons for coming to Jiangcheng was for Annie. Secondly, it was for the purpose of returning to the family in 3 years' time in a strong manner and holding the power. Such a top-tier young man should never be messed with. Finally arriving in front of Annie's office, Yining tried knocking on the door. Knock knock knock. Come in, Anne's voice came out. Yining pushed open the door and saw a red dress of Annie's brows furrowed, staring at the computer screen in thought. It wasn't until Yining approached that Annie raised her head. Seeing that it was Yining, her tightly locked willow brows instantly relaxed, and her cold and serious expression blossomed into a smile. You sit down for a while, I'm a bit busy right now. Yining nodded, but did not head to the sofa first. Instead, he picked up the coffee pot filled with coffee on the coffee table and added a steaming cup of coffee for Annie. Thanks. Annie smiled and thanked, lifting the cup to take a small sip. The next 2 hours. Annie explained to Yining what it meant to be a true workaholic. In the office, in and out, there were at least no less than 10 people. Each one of them was the first or second in command of the company's various departments. They saw Yining on the sofa, said hello, and then discussed work-related matters with Annie. This scene made Yining feel a little embarrassed. He was in charge of so many assets himself, whether it was the Flying Fish platform or Star Ocean Airlines. Even Jiangnan Commercial Street in Jiangcheng, he had barely managed it. Wasn't he a bit too idle? And this is the normal working condition of a company president. Which is like Yining, 3 days fishing 2 days sunshine net. There is something secretary to do, nothing to do secretary. No, as a big boss, he didn't even have a secretary. Or, simply do not need, anyway, cannot do anything serious. Look at the hard-working people, and then think of yourself every day to flirt with girls. The thickness of the cheek is comparable to the city wall. Inverted turn also added turret. Yining, are somewhat ashamed. Vaguely, Yining felt an itch on his face. Opening his eyes, a stunningly beautiful face in front of him was only about 10 centimeters away. And was half bent over, her scallion white fingertips pinching a small handful of her hair. Scraping Yining's cheek with the fine tips of her hair. Only when she saw that Yining was awake did she stop moving. Just as Yining was thinking that Annie was going to sit beside him. Only to see Annie stretch out her hands and rest them on Yining's sturdy shoulders. Kneeling on the sofa, she straddled Yining's thighs. Yining also wrapped his arms around Anne's thin and soft waist, slightly exerted himself, and brought it towards his arms. And obediently stuck to Yining's body. When did I fall asleep? Yining asked with a smile. And pursed her red lips and shook her head with a light smile. When I was done with my work, you were already sound asleep. Is there any more work behind you? No, wait until the afternoon and we'll go racing together. Speaking of racing, Anne's eyes were glowing and gleaming. Yining really can't be interested in racing, but since Annie likes it, he will accompany her. Good, then where are we going now? Yi Ning nodded in agreement. In the face of Yi Ning's question, Annie's face flashed with a flirtatious color. Putting her sandalwood mouth close to Yi Ning's ear, she whispered, "Little brother, I don't want to go anywhere right now, I just want to be with you, giggle giggle." The tone of voice was delicate and charming, as if it was a blazing fire that scorched Yi Ning's heart and soul. This can really be an unadulterated vixen. And the depth of the Tao is rare in the world. Even Yi Ning, who had walked the rivers and lakes for years, was nearly unable to resist. Yi Ning cupped Annie's beautiful face with both hands and kissed her full red lips. Well. The golden sunlight sprinkled into the room through the window, making the entire room a few points brighter. I don't know if it was because of the light, but Annie's face seemed to have become a bit more moist than just now. She wouldn't be as shy as Su Weier and Mo Qingqing to the point of keying out of a 3-room apartment. However, kissing Yi Ning passionately in the office still made her a little embarrassed. In particular, the constantly undulating mountains indicated her inner unrest. "Little brother, you are very skillful," the slowed down Anne's face reappeared to put on a smiley look, and said unhurriedly. Yi Ning knew that Annie was connoting that she had other girlfriends. But he can only shake his head, will not refute. Whether it was the inn in front of him, or Su Weier, or Mo Qingqing who was in Yangchang, they were all people Yi Ning would not give up on. Of course, there was also Bai Yilahua, who didn't smile much but drew a sketch of him while he was asleep. "What? Holding me clearly in your hands, and still looking towards other women?" Seeing Yi Ning's eyes rolling as if he was remembering something. And couldn't help but spit out, "Sister Weier was right, you really are a complete philanderer." Chapter 83 Dongshan Racing Circuit. After lunch. After Annie gave a slight explanation of her work to her secretary Xiaoyan, she left the company shoulder to shoulder with Yi Ning. It was different from when Yi Ning arrived. Although there were quite a few people who came up to greet them, the tone of their voices were all much more serious. Especially those little girls, all of them didn't dare to go forward. They just looked at the backs of both Yi Ning and Annie, looking sad and very lost. Yi Ning and Annie were just too well matched. The two of them together were truly the golden couple, the talented man and the talented woman. Not to mention competing with Annie, even the courage to face her, the little girls cannot take out. Walking into the parking lot where there weren't many people, Annie took the initiative to take Yi Ning's arm. The two were very close. The soft touch blew the surface of the lake in Yi Ning's heart, and his heart was stirred. Although it is not as large as Vivian's, it is also very full. As for Mo Qingqing, it doesn't matter, small is also very cute. Coming to Yi Ning's seat, he took the initiative to hand over the driving right to Annie. Annie's sexy red lips pursed, revealing a smile. "Little brother, so good, Mua." Kissed the corner of Yi Ning's mouth, leaving a faint red mark. Sitting on the main driver, Annie touched the steering wheel, her bewitching eyes glowing. Staring straight ahead, her expression was excited. The engine buzzed. As if it were a mountain beast, emitting a roar that resounded in the silent parking lot. "Sit tight." Annie spoke at the same time, her foot stepped on the gas pedal and sped away. Koenigsegg 11 once again became the prettiest boy on the road, especially seeing that the one driving the car was also a young lady with an extremely high face value. It was even more so that many male compatriots shouted, "Rich woman begging to be adopted." "I don't want to make an effort." Yi Ning also suffered from jealousy because of this. He is so handsome, but also sitting in the passenger seat, it seems to be a white boy. This is the first time that Yi Ning has come to Dongshan Racetrack. The scenery here is beautiful and the view is breathtaking. On the parking lot, many supercars had already stopped. Lamborghini, Ferrari, Porsche, and so on were a lot. Of course, most of these cars were priced around $6 million, with very few exceeding $10 million. There were even fewer cars that were on the same level as Yi Ning's Koenigsegg 11. Because Yi Ning's car is not a car that can be bought with money, the level of rich kids in Jiangcheng is still far from enough to play with these. "Old Han, look. Koenigsegg." Liao Xian patted Han Yu's shoulder and pointed forward and exclaimed. "Oops. Don't be so shocked, can it still have Yes Koenigsegg 11 strong?" Han Yu face indifferent. But he still followed the direction Liao Xian pointed to look. When he saw the dark shadow, Han Yu's pupils shrunk. "It's really brother Ye's car." The voice that spoke was loud, causing Zhou Chen and Ai Yang to both also notice the figure of the Koenigsegg 11 in the first moment. They were wide-eyed and surprised. How did Yi Ning come here? Didn't he dislike racing? Racing wasn't as important as his sweet time with his sister-in-law. But to say that this wasn't Yi Ning's car, Han Yu and the others were bound to disbelieve it. Besides Yi Ning, who else in Jiangcheng can afford this car? The Koenigsegg 11 was getting closer and closer, and it happened to be parked not far away from Han Yu and the others. A few moments later, sure enough, Yi Ning's dashing figure was seen. He quickly walked to the other side of the car, opened the main driver's door, and stretched out his hand. Han Yu and the others were puzzled. Why was Yi Ning coming out from the passenger side? Thinking about it, several people walked together near Yi Ning. At this time, from the main driver stretched out a slender white hand. Yi Ning took the initiative to shake. This scene made Han Yu several people dumbfounded. Because the woman standing beside Yi Ning, who else could it be if not Big Sister Annie? They had rubbed their eyes, and for a moment, they actually felt that they were hallucinating. However, it was only when their gazes focused on Yi Ning and Annie once again that they realized that they hadn't been mistaken. That's right. Red dress, red hair, stunningly beautiful appearance, and a tall figure. Who else could this be if not Annie? But the two were actually holding hands. How is this possible? Brother Yi, big sister, what are you guys? Han Yu opened his mouth and asked. The other three also looked at Yi Ning suspiciously, hoping to get an answer from him. While Yi Ning was finding the title big sister quite amusing. Annie raised her and Yi Ning's hands up and smiled. Can't you tell from this? Saying so, she gently lifted her red hair, which had been somewhat disorganized by the wind. We're together. Hiss. Han Yu's few people sucked in a breath of cool air. Although there were already guesses, when Annie admitted it herself, it was still a bit of a surprise. Especially since Big Sister had actually declared their relationship with a face of joy. There was no trace of faking. The other second-generation people present who knew Annie were just as stupefied. Annie had always been synonymous with indifference in their hearts. To say that the big sister's looks were indeed impeccably beautiful. But the number of people chasing after her was pitifully small. It's not that they don't want to, but they don't dare. Annie's family history, in the circle of second generation in Jiangcheng, is standing in the top of the ranks. Together with Annie's own master's degree in finance from the Imperial Capital University, she could beat all the young men present. Chapter 84 The Curve of. Especially after Annie took over Anshin Pharmaceuticals, she was transformed into the chairman of the Iceberg Beauty. With these halos on her head, not to mention asking for a relationship, even talking to her on weekdays, she was a bit scared. Because they have long silently put Annie on the same level as their fathers. But is such a big sister. Surprisingly, she announced that she was in love today in front of everyone. This was too surprising. Even more so, many people had already cast pitying glances at Yi Ning. Yes, it was pity. Because no one would think that Yi Ning could handle Annie. Even Han Yu and the others felt that their brother Yi wasn't being a bit too brave. With such a strong character as Big Sister, could brother Yi have a good time with her? Moreover, Yi Ning's golden house also hides a beautiful anchor woman who was as good-looking as Annie. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but sweat hard for Yi Ning. Yi brother, do you want to be so brave? You dare to step on any boat, aren't you worried about capsizing? Yi Ning was somewhat baffled by their eyes. However, he didn't care, and after greeting Han Yu and the others, he was pulled by Yen's hand and headed to the apartment building not far away. The apartment was white in color as a whole, and was not high, only more than 10 floors, but it still covered a pretty expansive area. The two had just walked through the door when a tall, thin middle-aged man in a suit walked quickly. Little An, the things you need are ready, the tall thin middle-aged man said with a relaxed face. And smiled and nodded, Uncle Chu, please. The tall and thin middle-aged man smiled and shook his head, not troublesome, counting up we are all your employees, there are things you command on the line. Saying that, his eyes swept over the hand that Annie and Yi Ning were holding together before he focused on Yi Ning. With a pleased smile on his face, he asked, this is Yi Ning, isn't it, and he really is a talented man. Uncle Chu is polite. Yi Ning responded with a smile. Although he didn't recognize the person in front of him, it was correct to shout after Annie. I'm not sure if you're a good person, but I'm sure you're a good person, and I'm sure you're a good person. Chu Zhongji was originally Annie's father's driver. From before Annie was born, Chu Zhongji has been following her father. Even when Annie was a child, it was Chu Zhongji who drove her to and from school. It could be said that Chu Zhongji had watched Annie grow from a small baby to the current chairman of the board. It's just that for so many years, he has never seen Annie have a favorite boy. This made Chu Zhongji, who regarded Annie as his daughter, very regretful. Now, Annie finally had a boyfriend, and he could see that this girl was very concerned about Yining. Hearing Chu Zhongju's words, Annie took a deep breath. Lowering her head, she whispered in affirmation, "Yes, he definitely will." Annie's tone was a bit low, and Yining knew that she was thinking of her father. Holding her hand a few points tighter, through the palm of his hand, he passed the warmth to her. And of course noticed and looked at Yining's affectionate face with a slight smile. At this moment, she was not the cold and frosty chairman of the board, nor was she the seductive siren. She is just a fatherless, lovable girl. Quickly go and change your clothes, there is still half an hour before the track starts. Chu Zhongji looked down at his watch and urged. Good, Uncle Chu will see you later. Annie waved her hand. Yining also nodded towards Chu Zhongji, Uncle Chu, we will go up first. The two walked into the elevator hand in hand, and Annie told Yining some things about her. It turned out that this huge Dongshan racetrack was Annie's father's 25th birthday gift to her. It turned out that a year later, his father died in a car accident. Annie liked to drive herself and didn't need a driver. Chu Zhongji volunteered to come to this East Mountain Raceway to help take care of it. Yining then realized why Annie, who was serious and earnest at an XIN medicine. In front of Chu Zhongji, she didn't have the slightest bit of posture as a boss, and even respected him very much. Annie was the boss of Dongshan Raceway, so naturally, she had a room that belonged exclusively to her. Opening the door, the entire room was spacious and bright. Especially the floor-to-ceiling windows of the joint rows made the view become even more open. Even the tall tower on the opposite hill was clearly visible. The scenery here is so nice. Yining heartily marveled. Do you like it? I'll ask Uncle Chu to reserve one especially for you. Yining shook his head, staring at Annie's delicate face and said with a smile, No, we'll just use one. Said, a hand wrapped around Annie's waist, slightly raised, two groups of soft clothes in front of Yining. Little brother, we are here to race, you will be delayed. And hands around Yining's neck, said with a smile. Yining smiled evilly, don't I have to drive now? Oh. It means that your driving skills are very good, oh? Annie Tung licked her red lips, her eyes brightening. Yining squeezed his eyes towards Annie, can you still not know if my driving skills are good or not? Said the two of them at the same time close, lips kissed together. A few minutes later, Annie changed into a sportswear and walked out of the bedroom. With her red hair tied up, she had quite a spiritual and capable feeling. Although the sportswear hid her perfect figure, it still made Yining feel stunning. Worthy of being a goblin, she looked good in anything. Chapter 85 The old road is about to be overwhelmed. The Dongshan racetrack is divided into a professional track and a non-professional track. Using both tracks had the same requirement, which was the need to make reservations and queue up. Annie, as the owner, naturally didn't need to queue up. There were already people using the professional track. Those were real racers who often flew to different parts of the country to participate in races. Although Annie's skills were good, there was still a very big gap compared to Pro Brother. This is not surprising, people train every day, how can they be better than you amateurs? If you want to talk about talent, who doesn't have some talent when you can go to the competition? Of course, the female driver can have this skill is already very impressive. Other people don't say, at least Yining has a deep understanding. Annie's driving skills were really first class. The two of them had just arrived at the parking lot when the radio blared the announcement of the track opening. Yi, are you going on the track? Seeing that Yining had also changed into a sports outfit, Han Yu asked. The loud roar of the engine was heard from time to time on the professional track. Yining shrunk his neck and shook his head, I'll just cheer for you guys. Then what are you changing into? Han Yu asked with a look of regret. Yining thought for a moment and solemnly said, I'm afraid of dirtying my several $100,000 suit. Han Yu gave a thumbs up. You're awesome. After saying that, Han Yu several people walked in the direction of his car. Han Yu, are you sure you don't want to join me? Coming to the side of Koenigsegg 11, Annie asked. I'm not going. Yining replied very firmly. If you accompany me to run a few laps, I will take you home tonight, and attached herself to Yining's ear and whispered. The charming heart seduced the soul, making Yining's body tremble. Since seeing Annie again, this demonic spirit seduced him every day. But every time, he only drank soup and didn't eat meat. Now that he thought about it, it was really bitter for Su Weier. At this moment, the demon even opened this condition, this is not a pure test of the old Taoist monk. As an old Taoist monk who walks The rivers and lakes, it's only right to subdue the demons and get rid of the devils. Yining nodded his head and said in a serious manner, if I don't go, who will? The demon, go, with me on the Chuang'em out on the car. And looked at Yining's determined eyes, and couldn't help but feel a little amused in her heart. Shaking her head, she opened the car door and bowed to drill in. The buzzing. Buzz. Buzz. On the parking lot, the engines were deafeningly loud. More than 10 supercars in a row appeared at the departure point at the same time. The most eye-catching of them all was naturally Yining's Koenigsegg 11. There were even quite a few people who took out their cell phones and took pictures to show off to their friends. This was a real top-of-the-line car, and it would be an honor to see it, not to mention drive it. With the sound of the radio, all sorts of supercars sped away like reined-in horses. Yining squeezed the seatbelt in front of him with both hands, his eyes staring dead ahead. As Annie continued to accelerate, he felt like he was about to fly. Don't panic, it's not even close yet. Annie was worthy of being a veteran of car racing and appeared to be at ease. The fingers on the steering wheel looked like they were rattling the surface of the water, one after the other, very easily. Yining stole a glance at the dashboard, and at this moment, the speed of the car had come to about 220. His heart thumped, and he silently shifted his sight. But Annie is obviously not satisfied with the status quo, continued to accelerate, will block the front of the car one by one beyond. It was obvious that her skills were really better than many amateurs. Worthy of being the owner of the Dongshan racing circuit. Finally completing the last lap, the Koenigsegg 11 driven by Annie was the first to cross the finish line. After getting off the car, Yining immediately felt dizzy. Are you all right? Seeing Yining closing his eyes and softening his temples, and supported Yining, her eyes worried and with a touch of self-doubt. It's fine, just take a rest. Yining shook his head and drank 2 mouthfuls of mineral water. Yining was much more relaxed. Not to mention, although a little dizzy, but to see both sides of the track speeding backward shadow, Yining also feel quite cool. After sitting in the rest area for more than 20 minutes, Yining's condition gradually improved. Thinking of the condition that An had said earlier, Yining instantly became a bit concerned. Cough. Yining deliberately coughed twice. Goblin, shouldn't we go back? Meeting Yining's expectant eyes, Annie knew what this person was thinking. What? Is little brother so impatient? Anne asked with a smile on her face. Indeed. Yining nodded his head and said with a straight face, he really couldn't wait. This time, Anne was speechless. Did she just mean this? Yining gave a blank look, beautiful eyes showing infinite flavor. Then what are you waiting for? Quickly follow, don't you want to go back earlier? The two of them both came to Annie's room and showered and changed. After the bath, Annie changed her skirt and walked out of the bathroom, seeing Yining holding a bottle of water, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and tilting her head to drink. Through the light, Yining's throat knots bulged, one up and one down clearly visible. For a moment, Annie actually looked dumbfounded. Her man, he was just too handsome. She slowly came behind Yining, and from behind, she wrapped a hand around Yining's waist, pressing her face but on Yining's back. Finished washing? Yining asked. Well. Then let's go. And did not let go of her hands. No, let me hold it for a while longer. Yining gently hold up the stomach on the two white slippery, gentle, later go back to hold cannot? At this time, and but in Yining's ear whispered, later home should be you from the back to hold me. His Yining hands suddenly trembled. The old road is about to be unable to top it. Chapter 86 Me Rome, Blitz Reward Financial Building. Yining and Annie came to the apartment lobby just in time to run into Chu Zhongji, the person in charge of the Dongshan racing circuit. Uncle Chu. Uncle Chu. Anne and Yining opened their mouths together and greeted. Little and Yining, are you guys leaving? Chu Zhongji wore a smile on his face. Ever since he had learned from the phone call yesterday that Anne was in love, he had been very happy in his heart. Especially after seeing Yining, his face was always filled with smiles. Even the employees of Dongshan were privately discussing that Manager Chu was in a really good mood today. Yes, I want to bring Yining to meet my little mom. Chu Zhongji listened to it indistinctly and nodded. I should, Xiaorong in this life alas not to say. After sighing heavily, he focused his gaze on Yining. Yining, you must treat Xiaoan well, no matter what the outcome is in the future, you must not hurt her. Chu Zhongji spoke with a loud voice that could not be questioned. He knew that for young people nowadays, breakups were the norm. If Yining and An found that they were not suitable in the end, there was nothing that could be done about it. But he didn't want Annie to be sad, or at least he didn't want her to be unhappy all the time. Yining nodded seriously. Uncle Chu, don't worry, I will cherish her. Ever since I ran into Annie, I realized that the world is still a beautiful place. This sentence was not wrong. If he hadn't bound the system after that day, he wouldn't have his current life. He wouldn't have met Imo Qingqing, Su Wei'er, and Bai Yilihua. Not to mention that he wouldn't have met the goblins again. Annie stood on the sidelines, and when she heard Yining's words, the corners of her mouth clearly rose in an arc. A pair of heart-stoppingly beautiful eyes blinked, and there were peach blossoms in her pupils that mesmerized people. Good. With your words, I am relieved. Xu Zhongji's voice was thick, saying that he reached out to pat Yining's shoulder. It's getting late, hurry back. Xu Zhongji habitually looked at his watch, smiled and reminded, Xiaowen, remember to say hello to Xiaorong for me. I know, Uncle Chu, goodbye. After bidding farewell to Xu Zhongji, there were still quite a few people waiting in line on the parking lot. It's just that Han Yu's several people's cars are no longer there, and the odds are that they are looking for a place to dash off and have a good time. Annie handed the car keys to Yining, signaling for him to drive. Based on Annie's guidance, Yining realized. It turned out that both her home and her own villa in Dragonview on the Clouds were in the same area, not far apart. Come to think of it, it was right, this was a high-class residential area developed by many real estate developers together. There were many villa neighborhoods, becoming one of the gathering places for rich businessmen in Zhengcheng. Annie's family was prominent and it was very normal to have a house in this neighborhood. Unlike Dragonview on the Clouds, Annie's house was said to be a villa, but it was more like a Chinese-style courtyard. Although the floors were not high, it covered a large area. In particular, the small bridges and waterfalls and pavilions inside the courtyard made Yining especially fond of it. It wasn't bad to spend money to buy a house here. Near, you're back today. Possibly hearing the sound of the courtyard door being pushed open, a beautiful woman dressed in plain clothes with her hair coiled up, looking around 37 or 88, walked out of the center hall. Seeing that the person standing at the doorway was Annie, Mirong was very happy. Annie had now taken over her father's position and was busy almost every day. Unless it was a holiday, she usually rarely went home and usually stayed at an XIN Medicine staff dormitory. Mirong was about to go forward when she turned her eyes to see a handsome-looking man standing beside Annie. Just as she was puzzled, Annie spoke up first. Mom, this is Yining, my boyfriend. Annie took the initiative to take Yining's arm and secretly poked Yining's waist with her finger. Yining understood, and sent the gift he had bought on the way. Auntie Me, hello, my name is Yining, I'm Annie's boyfriend, you can teach me Xiaoning. To be honest, if you normally see Mirong, Yining is absolutely impossible to call her aunt. Because Mirong was only a dozen years older than himself, he should reasonably be addressed as sister. But who called her Anne's little mom? People were of a higher generation. Mirong froze in place for half a day until Yining sent the gift to her before she came back to her senses. With a surprised face, she said loudly, Near. You actually found a boyfriend. Her reaction made Yining puzzled for a while. Even if Annie was the iceberg chairman, the type that no one should approach. There was no need to be so surprised when she suddenly found a boyfriend, right? And she was so handsome. Isn't it normal for Annie to fall in love? Perhaps. Feeling that her reaction was a bit too much, Mirong tidied up her emotions and smiled somewhat embarrassedly. Taking the paper bag in Yining's hand, she slightly combed her too messy hair. I'm sorry, Xiaoning, Auntie just scared you, right? No, Auntie, Annie's aura is very strong on weekdays, and it is indeed not difficult for other men to get close to her. Yining shook his head and explained with a smile. After giving Yining a somewhat strange look in her eyes, Mirong lowered her head and took out the silk scarf and the paper bag. Showing a happy face, she thanked, Xiaoning, thank you, this gift is very much enjoyed by Auntie. Ding! Host spends 26,000 renminbi for Mirong, triggering a blitz, rewarding Magic City's Rhineland Gateway Financial Building. The financial building in Mordor. Although Yining did not know the specific district of the Rhineland Gateway Financial Building. But with the word Mordor in it, how could it be an ordinary building? Anyway, when the time came, he was going to accompany Su Wei'er to Magic City to participate in the Flying Fish live event. It's not bad to stroll around his own property on the way. Speaking of which, he still had a villa there. Chapter 87 The wind is gentle too. In the evening, Mirong was the chef, and Annie and Yining helped out. Yining couldn't have imagined that Anne, who was the chairman of the board, was also very skillful at chopping vegetables and cooking rice. Apparently she usually often cooked and ate by herself at home. Zayawai Zawizing is specifically to describe the goblin Ah. Yi Ning smiled with an expression of having picked up a treasure. When Mi Rong was frying the vegetables, he drove Yi Ning and Annie out of the kitchen. The two of them snuggled up to each other on the sofa and watched TV. Yi Ning felt his shoulders sink and had both palms on his shoulders, exhaling as if inviting credit. He, little brother couldn't imagine that I could cook, could he? Yi Ning smiled and nodded his head, reaching out to wrap his arms around Annie's waist, which was indeed quite a surprise. Giggle, this is a surprise, then there is a bigger surprise later, what about? What bigger surprise? The corner of Yi Ning's mouth lifted, his face sly. The rice is cooked. Annie's voice was small, but it was like a sharp arrow piercing into Yi Ning's chest. After speaking, the full red lips gently touched on Yi Ning's cheek. With a delicate smile, she got up and left Yi Ning's embrace. Waiting for Annie to re-drill into the kitchen, Yi Ning took several deep breaths before calming his agitated mood. This leprechaun's killing power was also too great. If it wasn't for the fact that there was still Mi Rong in the house right now, he would have picked up Annie and cooked dinner. The dinner was sumptuous, 6 dishes and 1 soup, and the 3 of them didn't even finish it in the end. After the meal, at Mi Rong's suggestion, Annie took Yi Ning around the neighborhood. The two of them walked by the artificial lake, and Annie talked about her and Mi Rong's affair. It turned out that when Annie was 4 years old, her real mother died due to illness. Her father brought Annie up by himself. Later on, the family business grew bigger and bigger. Annie's father also became very busy, and the time he spent with his daughter was all squeezed out. When Annie was 10 years old, Mirren, in her early 20s, came to the family as a nanny to take care of her. Anne's father and Mi Rong gradually develop a relationship. After Mi Rong's change in status, Anne did not like her and even disliked her extremely. However, Mi Rong never complained, but instead took care of Annie's life in a more meticulous way. Even later, Annie even suggested that her father have a child with Mi Rong, still rejected by Mi Rong, saying that having Annie as a daughter was enough. Therefore, to Annie, although Mi Rong had no blood relationship with her, her position in her heart was no lower than her biological mother. Even though Mi Rong hadn't read much and was not highly educated. But Annie's feelings for her were from the bottom of her heart. Speaking, Annie's voice grew weaker and weaker until it was not. The moon was bright, and the last wisps of the late spring breeze cut across the lake. The bright reflection of the jade disk set off sparkling waves. Anne stared at the lake in a daze and was lost in thought, and her soft water-like eyes were watery and a little red. She wants her father. Yi Ning gently embraced Annie from behind, his sturdy arms encircling her slender waist. With his head resting on Annie's slippery shoulders, he closed his eyes and tenderly said, "Goblin, I will take good care of you instead of uncle." Yi Ning spoke in a very soft voice, but it was incomparably heavy in Annie's ears. It was like a sledgehammer swinging out, leaving a loud bang in her heart. Annie quietly wiped away the tear tracks at the corners of her eyes with her slender little fingers, and with her beautiful eyes slightly closed, her delicate body tilted back slightly and leaned against Yi Ning. The breeze is clear, and the water waves are not rising. Yi Ning, the wind tonight is really gentle. The cool wind blew a strand of red silk from her temples, carrying a faint rose fragrance that drifted into the distance. Well, Yi Ning gently responded. Yi Ning. Kiss me. Well. Deep quiet lakeside, a couple of lips and teeth, deep kiss. The two closed their eyes and felt each other's slight sniffles. The handsome man and the beautiful woman, snuggling together, under the boundless moonlight, painted a beautiful picture. 2/4 of an hour later, the two went home holding hands. After exchanging greetings, Mi Rong's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise when she saw Annie pulling Yi Ning's hand into her own dorm room. Then she smiled and nodded again, getting up and leaving the living room. Inside Annie's room. Goblin, why do I feel that Auntie is looking at me with strange eyes? Yi Ning finally couldn't help but ask. When they had just met today, Mi Rong's look had been a bit strange. At first, he had thought that he had misread it. But after seeing Mi Rong's surprised look again just now, Yi Ning was certain that he hadn't misread it. For some reason, there was some small panic in his heart. Did he? And wanted to laugh a little, but still asked with amusement. There is. Yi Ning nodded heavily, his expression incomparably certain. Seeing the corners of Anne's mouth that couldn't help but rise and flatten at times, Yi Ning knew that this goblin definitely knew the reason. So he grinned, pretending to be ruthless, and slowly approached Annie step by step. Quickly say. Otherwise, you don't want to have a good time tonight. But not only was Annie not intimidated by Yi Ning, who had a vicious expression, but she also took the initiative to hook Yi Ning's neck. "Little brother, I want to see how you won't let me have a good time." Yi Ning smoothly placed his hands on top of Annie's thin waist, using the same way he dealt with Su Weier to tickle Annie's waist nest. Annie was also quite ticklish, but her reaction was obviously not as strong as Su Weier's. She just closed her eyes and clenched her teeth. And her fair face bounced slightly. After 10 seconds or so, Annie finally lost the battle. "Little brother, stop scratching, I'll tell you just." At the same time that Yi Ning stopped, Annie's words rang in his ears. "Actually, I once had a relationship." Chapter 88 Annie's Secret. Yi Ning nodded. Annie was still 2 years older than even he was. It was normal to have been in love. "This is nothing, ah." Yi Ning said indifferently, "The day we met, I had also just broken up." And some do not dare to look directly into the eyes of Yi Ning, stammered, "I am a male boyfriend." "Well, your ex-boyfriend how?" Yi Ning did not understand their own meaning, and took a deep breath. "I said, I am the boyfriend." "You are." The huge contrast, so that Yi Ning did not react for a moment. With his mouth wide open, he stared blankly at Annie, frozen in place, and drooped her head and bowed her head slightly. Stroking the red hair that hung over her shoulders, she used it to cover her burning face. After a while, Yi Ning asked, "You mean your ex is a girl?" "Uh-huh." Annie's voice was as faint as a mosquito, and her head seemed to nod and not nod. Luckily, the two of them were quite close, or else Yi Ning wouldn't have been able to hear Annie's answer. After receiving Annie's affirmation, Yi Ning exhaled a heavy breath. He finally understood why Mi Rong had stared at him with a strange look for several moments. It was because Mi Rong was aware that Annie used to like females. That was why when she heard and introduced Yi Ning, she had that sentence. "You actually found a boyfriend." The focus in people's words wasn't on the relationship, but on the gender. "Family members, who understands, my girlfriend, used to be a little lily. Even the one on the offensive side." "What about that ex-frontal ex-girlfriend of yours?" Yi Ning always felt how this sentence was so weird. "You don't have to worry, she's already married," and replied in a small voice. Yi Ning didn't have the good sense to say, "Did I say I was worried?" "Wait a minute." Yi Ning was alerted in his heart after finishing his sentence. This goblin couldn't really be both male and female, could it? His Xiao Weier, his Qingqing, and possibly his Bai Yilua wouldn't really be swept away by this demon, would they? Thinking of this even really TM some worry up. How? Fear? Seeing Yi Ning staring at her with a wary face, and understood what this man was thinking after a little thought. Ahem, no. Yi Ning shook his head, pretending to be calm. Annie's pupils flickered, tiptoed up, and gently pressed on Yi Ning's lips. The touch was split. A pair of white as snow arms slightly exerted themselves, tightly wringing Yi Ning's waist and back. The small ears were close to Yi Ning's hard chest, listening to his heartbeat and explaining. "In fact, you really don't have to worry. First, my ex was my best friend, and now that she's married, the two of us haven't been in contact for a long time. Secondly, I said in the morning that I only want to be with you now." Yi Ning drifted off. It turned out that Annie's sentence had this layer of meaning. Rightly so, if she wasn't really willing to be with him, then Annie wouldn't have brought him home to see Mi Rong. Thinking of this, Yi Ning raised his hand to Anne's delicate face, his fingertips gently clasping the back of Anne's soft neck. Once again, he captured her fiery lips. Annie's heart was surprised, her hands slowly raised, naturally wrapping her arms around Yi Ning's neck in response. Until the two people's breathing became heavy. Knock, knock, knock. A soft knocking sound came from the doorway. Both of them stopped moving at the same time, coincidentally opening their eyes and perking up their ears. "Xiaoning, near, I'm afraid that you young people don't understand. Bought something and hung it on the doorknob, remember to take it off." After Mi Rong finished speaking, the kicking sound of slippers drifted away. Yi Ning touched the tip of his nose, somewhat embarrassed. In fact, Mi Rong didn't need to worry at all, because the two of them had made a side trip to a small store when they went to buy the gift for her. What to do? What can be done about this? And gave Yi Ning a breathless blank look. "Since my mom bought it all, then just bring it in." Although Mi Rong went into the bedroom, she still left a thin crack in the door, always keeping an eye on the movements outside. Until she heard the sound of Annie's room door opening, plus the sound of plastic bags. Only then revealed a pleased smile, quietly closed the door. Annie sighed. Yi Ning once again held her in his arms, but was pushed away by one hand. "Do not hurry to take a shower, you do not want to sleep?" Annie laughed and said. "Then, let's take a bath together." With that said, Yi Ning pushed Annie's thin shoulders and was about to head to the bathroom. "No, no, no." And firmly shook her head. "You go to the bathroom outside. This is not the same. You in the end do not go?" Annie's beautiful eyes glared. "Hey, alright, alright, alright." Yi Ning left, and quietly came to the door, attached her ear to the door to listen to a long time. Before mysteriously from the handbag out of a red sailor suit and a cat ear hairbands and cattail toys. Waiting for Yi Ning to return to the room while wiping her hair with a towel. Suddenly, he saw Annie walk out of the bathroom wearing a sailor suit with cat ears on her head and a tail tied behind her. With a light step, she slowly came forward, raising her hands and feet to show her flirtatiousness, as if it was the blood-colored rose. "Beautiful." Gulp. Yi Ning's eyes were dull, his throat bulged, and he swallowed his saliva. It seems to be very satisfied with Yi Ning's anyway, and S red lips are lightly raised, and her eyes send her eyes. "Little brother, do I look good?" "Goblin, you are too beautiful." "Then what are you waiting for?" Annie opened her arms. Yi Ning stepped forward, squatted slightly, and picked her up. In late spring, the first cicadas chirped in the quiet night sky, like a pair of large hands covering the sky, tearing open the prelude to summer. Chapter 89 Going Home, Duingying. Early June. Through Yi Ning's help, Yi Xiaoxiao and a few of her good friends successfully entered Jiangcheng Kangda Hospital for internship. By the way, Yi Ning also invited a few young girls to have a big meal at the Jiangnan Hotel. At first, Yi Xiaoxiao's friends were quite formal, but after becoming familiar with them, they asked Yi Ning about them. In particular, they asked if Yi Ning was a couple with Bai Yiluo, the flower of Jiangcheng University. Yi Ning can only explain that the two have not reached that point. "Speaking of Bai Yiluo, it's been many days since I've seen her." Although the two of them had been in contact via cell phone from time to time, Yi Ning still somewhat missed that stunning silhouette that liked to wear white dresses. Speaking of which, that expressionless schoolgirl even said that they could kiss each other when they met again. Thinking about it, Yi Ning's thoughts became even more intense. Alas! Was this pining? He was clearly craving someone else's body. Shaking his head and no longer thinking about it, he currently had to go back to his hometown in Yangcheng. Yi Xiaoguo's college entrance exam was coming soon, he naturally had to go back. Although Ye's mom had instructed him to bring Su Wire with him the next time he went back. But Yi Ning thought that Yangcheng still had Moqingqing in it, so he thought it was better to forget about it. Even though both women knew that he had more than one woman, there was no telling what it would be like if they really met. Driving across the provinces was too tiring, so this time Yi Ning simply told Star Ocean Airlines to prepare a ticket to Jin City in Sichuan Province. Yi Ning's face value was superb. And the whole body, our famous brand, add up this shall not hundreds of thousands of dollars? Such a rich and handsome young man with a face appearing in the first-class cabin naturally attracted the attention of many pretty flight attendants. Especially those flight attendants who were single and wanted to catch a golden son-in-law. Yi Ning's eyes were more like those of a vicious wolf that had found its prey, glowing with green light. If Yi Ning hadn't put on a serious expression of "do not approach," the bold ones might have come up and added their contact information. But even so, when Yi Ning got off the plane, he still received a note left by a young lady. At the same time, Yi Ning raised his eyebrows, and even said that "Mr. I wish you a pleasant journey." The voice was tinged with pout when she said it. However, Yi Ning was unmoved, and just silently threw the small note into the trash can as he walked out of the airport. There wasn't even a desire to open it up and take a look at it. It wasn't that the flight attendant lady wasn't pretty, but rather, just from her appearance alone, she was no less beautiful than some of the school's school beauties. With a score of 10 out of 10, there would have to be at least an 8.7. But compared to a top beauty like Su Wire, she was still quite inferior. If it was the Yi Ning of the past, he might actually add contact information to talk to her. Now that his tastes were spoiled, he couldn't afford to be interested in anyone else except for girls of Su Wire's caliber. The plane landed in Jincheng, and Yi Ning spent close to $800,000 to buy a silver BMW X5. This car was naturally bought for old Yi. Yima didn't have a driver's license, so even if she bought a car, she couldn't drive it. In fact, last time Yi Ning had said he wanted to buy a car, but Olji said nothing. Now that Yi Ning drove the new car back directly, Olji would have to accept it even if she didn't. Otherwise it will just sit at home and see if it hurts him. Ding. Host consumption 786,000 yuan, get 5 times cashback, cashback 3,930,000 yuan. Another close to $4 million arrived, barely. At this moment, Yining couldn't help but feel that he was drifting a bit. $4 million was barely enough? You know, before binding the system, $400 could be his rent for nearly half a month. Maybe he was used to driving a Mercedes-Benz Big G, but suddenly he was not accustomed to driving this kind of small car. Speaking of which, even if it is Koenigsegg 11, Yining feels that it is not as easy to drive as his own Big G. He drove the car to the entrance of the old neighborhood. While drive to the old neighborhood door, he just suddenly remembered that his family has long moved to the Mirror Water Bay 1 villa. Patting his head, he was about to turn the car around when he heard a young woman's voice. Yining, it's you. Du Wengying couldn't help but exclaim in shock when she saw the man sitting in the driver's seat with his hands on the steering wheel and a confident smile on his face. This was because the current Yining was too different from what she remembered. Although Yining had not changed much in terms of his appearance, he had only changed his hairstyle. However, the mental outlook could be completely said to be better than before by an unknown number of notches. Since Yining graduated from university and joined the workforce, every time he returned home for the new year, Du Wengying could find a hint of haggardness and decrepitude in his eyes. But now Yining, where is the previous disheveled? It is completely a successful person's self-confident appearance. Moreover, this brand new BMW X5 was an indication that Yining's life was very good nowadays. Yining lowered all the half-covered windows. What met his eyes was Du Wengying, who was wearing light blue short sleeves and denim shorts, thin-framed glasses, and a ponytail. Her hands were still carrying the things she had just bought from the convenience store in front of the entrance, and she was looking at herself inside the car with an incredulous expression. Waving his hand towards Du Wengying, Yining greeted with a smile, "Wengying sister, you're back too?" Du Wengying's dad and Ye's relationship is not bad. The two families were originally in a neighborhood. Du Wengying grew up with excellent grades and was a child of others. Later, she graduated from a prestigious university and was successfully employed by a large company in Jincheng, so she has a bright future. She was a famous high achiever in the old neighborhood. Of course, this also has to do with her dad's somewhat showy personality. But no harm, no foul. Chapter 90, A Guide to Parent Identification. Yining, is this your car? Hearing Yining's greeting, Du Wengying was then certain that she really hadn't recognized the wrong person. At the same time, waves of shock rippled through her heart. She didn't know exactly what had happened to Yining. But she was certain that, at least at the beginning of the year, Yining definitely didn't have the ability to buy a several $100,000 BMW. It's considered mine as well. Yining nodded. The car was bought for Olji, but it was indeed written in his own name. Getting an affirmative answer from Yining, Du Wengying exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. You're a little too powerful for this. What's wrong? What took you so long to buy something, Wengying? At this time, a tall and thin man with a gentlemanly appearance came to Du Wengying's side and took the initiative to take the plastic bag in Du Wengying's hand. Yining, let me introduce you, this is my fiancée Xinchang. Xinchang, this is my playmate who grew up together, Yining. Yining and Xinchang nodded hello at the same time. Xinchang is about the same size as Yining, with a gentle appearance, and without a single wrinkle in his clothes. He should be a meticulous man in his day-to-day life. And when he saw Du Wengying, he took the initiative to go forward and take her things. He should be quite good to Du Wengying in his normal life. Otherwise, when Du Wengying introduced Xinchang, her face wouldn't be overflowing with happy smiles. At least on first impression, Yining had a pretty good feeling about this man. Then, Sister Wengying, I won't bother you and brother-in-law anymore, bye-bye. Right. Yining once again stuck his head out of the window and smiled. Don't forget to invite me for a drink when you get married, ha, said Yining as he drove the BMW X5, slowly moving away. Looking at the BMW gradually disappeared from sight. Xinchang pulled Du Wengying's sleeve. Let's go. Du Wengying tapped her chin, and when she turned around, she suddenly pulled Xinchang's elbow. What do you say? How about we ask Yining for help? Maybe he can help us. Xinchang pondered a little, but in the end he said after sighing helplessly. We need too much money to make this game, and ordinary people can't afford to play it. Although you hair little young can drive hundreds of thousands of cars, but to come up with tens of millions of cash, but it is still relatively difficult, right? After Du Wengying heard this, the golden light in her pupils disappeared, and a disheveled look appeared on her face. Xinchang was right, tens of millions of cash, even if others have, why would they invest in you? But now, they really don't have much to do. Leaving the old neighborhood, Yining spent half an hour before arriving at Mirror Water Bay. Hello sir, how can I help you? When Yining's car was parked, the handsome security guy walked up to the car window and asked cordially. Without waiting for Yining to answer, a middle-aged man in a suit and tie, looking like a small leader, walked over. He first said to the security guard, Xiao Zhang, you quickly go help Mr. Yi enter the license plate number into the system, I'll do it here. Okay, Manager Qian. Waiting for Xiao Zhang to run away, Manager Qian bowed, his knees slightly bent, and said to Yining with a smile. Mr. Yi, I'm Chen Jin, the property manager of Mirror Water Bay, please wait for a few moments, and when Xiao Zhang enters your license plate into the system, you can go in. Yining returned a smile, slightly puzzled, asked, Qian manager, how do you recognize me? Previously, when we entered your parents' information, we also entered the information of you and your sister. Coincidentally, I accidentally saw a photo of you and your sister. Actually, Yining didn't know that Chen Jin said it was a coincidence. In fact, he has specifically seen the photos of Yining's family. Just kidding, as the property manager of Mirror Water Bay. If he couldn't even recognize the One Villa family, would he still be qualified to stand here? After saying that, the intercom in his hand also sounded the voice of the security guy just now. Manager, Mr. Ye's license plate has been registered, you can drive in. Good. Chen Jin replied and looked towards Yining and bowed, Mr. Yi, welcome home. Thank you, for the trouble. Yining nodded slightly, lightly stepping on the gas pedal, the BMW X5 slowly drove into the neighborhood. 2 minutes later, it finally arrived at Villa 1. Yining got out of the car and knocked on the dark security door. Who is it? Inside the house, came Yima's voice. Mom, it's me, your son. Hearing Yining's voice, Yima opened the door to about 10 centimeters. Poking her head out, she glanced at Yining before looking around. Mom, I'm here. You don't even recognize your son? I know you're here, I'm looking for my daughter, where's my daughter? Yima stared at Yining and questioned. Xiaohua? She's at school, Mom, let me in. Yining naturally knew that Yima was not talking about Yi Xiaohua but Su Wire, and casually snorted. Want to muddle through. Yining naturally knew that Yi Xiaohua was not talking about Yi Xiaohua but Su Wire. Yi Mom laughed coldly, her own son what kind of she cannot know? Didn't bring Weiwei back right, then that's it, bye. After saying that, only to hear the sound of the door slamming. The sound of the door closing rang out. If Yining hadn't taken half a step back, he might have bumped into his nose. The appraisal is complete, this must be the real mom without a doubt.